Hello, friends. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Whatever time of day it is, welcome back to Warui Deshou. This is a half of the time anime podcast that is very bad, not by intention. We just can't help ourselves. We're just honest with ourselves. But we also think that our badness can produce a good effect if we put enough love and energy into it. We're here today to talk about Studio Ghibli's 2004 movie, Howl's Moving Castle. I am the Subtle Doctor. Along with me, as always, is your friend and mine, the guiltiest gear, the chromiest dome, the caballero himself, or caballote, probably, actually, is Shadon.
Hey, everyone. You were just saying, Doc, about how you felt about our podcast, and if I were to borrow some imagery from the very film we're about to discuss, we're kind of a ramshackle collection of things that just are bundled together, lurching all over the place. Sometimes we get seen, sometimes we don't. Bunch of eccentrics living inside of it. Yeah, I think that sums us up pretty aptly. But anyway, I hope wherever you are, whoever you are, you're doing really well right now. Unless you're Vladimir Putin, in which case, go fuck yourself.
Sometimes, old looking war machinery flies inside of our mouth. We have to sweep and mop and get rid of slime that's oozed all over the place. That happens all the time.
Yeah,
especially after you stream.
It's true. Especially after streaming Doom Eternal. It's a very messy game, that.
Terrible.
But yeah, I do have a bit of housekeeping we should get out of the way. We probably already know where this is going, given my previous comment, but it would be a bad thing if I didn't bring it up, basically. So we're recording this on the 24th of February 2022, and it'll be released fairly quickly, but no doubt people around the world who might be listening to this are currently aware of what's going on in Ukraine. I'm bringing this up only because we are going to be talking about this film's anti-war themes later on. And I'm bringing it up so that I don't bring it up then. Why am I saying this? Because, look, I don't want it to come across like as if we're going to talk about the anti-war stuff in Howl's Moving Castle without pretending that what's going on elsewhere doesn't exist. We don't live in a vacuum, and we don't criticize stuff in a vacuum. But conversely, I can speak for myself here and say, I have nothing to offer of any meaningful nature towards what's going on right now, other than that I fucking hate the situation the world is in. I don't care for it in the slightest. It makes me very sad and very disappointed in the timeline that we live in. And that's really all I have to say on it. If there's anything I could tell you, listener at home, or wherever you may be, that you could do or should do, it would be to take the time to donate to some organization of some description that will actively support Ukrainian citizens and civilians. That's my call to action here. So when we get to talking about the anti-war stuff later, no, I'm not going to make any glib asides to what's going on. I'm not going to otherwise bring up what's happening in the real world right now because it's a bit too raw for my taste. But I'm also not going to then ignore what's happened in the film itself because it is a very vital part of what it is about, both in terms of when the film was actually made and also just its general themes as well. So yeah, getting that out of the way there, we have nothing meaningful to say on it. I feel I can confidently point out, but I'm also not going to pretend it doesn't exist either. So, okay, PSA over. Let's crack on.
Yeah, well said. Thank you, Shadon. So, like I said in the intro, we're here to talk about this film, Howl's Moving Castle, but we're also probably going to talk, depending on what the audience questions are, and kind of what comes up over the course of our discussion. We don't script our discussions, folks. We don't talk to each other about what we're going to talk about beforehand. And I only loosely kind of make some notes. So our discussions are organic and
free range.
Can come up a lot or a little. Free range, right, indeed. Cage-free. Cage-free conversations. That's the new name of this podcast. I'm gonna pause right now, and we're gonna go file for that trademark. And we're back. We now have that trademark. No one else try to get that, please. Thank you very much. What I'm trying to circuitously get around to mentioning is the novel, the I think it's 1980s, Diana Wynne Jones fantasy novel, Howl's Moving Castle, which this movie is, I'm going to say this the strongest way I've ever said this on this podcast, loosely adapted from. We've covered a lot of different adaptations on this podcast, and I would venture to say that the grand majority of them are pretty faithful by and large. Some of them diverge a bit here and there. But whoo boy, this one, and I don't say this as a value judgment on the movie, because I think the movie can be enjoyed with or without knowing the content of the book. Man, it is this really, really different thing in a lot of important ways. The book and the world it exists in and what's going on are like this launching pad, this very, like, just the foundation that Miyazaki and company build on to make this movie and say what they want to say. So we could be talking about that a bunch. We will be talking about all sorts of other things to do with the film itself. Before we get into talking about the creatives a bit, Shadon, would you like to give a, I'm holding the DVD, the 2004 released American DVD. It's like, this is the first Ghibli thing that Disney got a hold of, I want to say. I don't think that they released Spirited Away over here. I know they didn't release Princess Mononoke because that was Miramax, and that had the whole thing of Miyazaki sending a katana to Harvey Weinstein with the little the urban legend, you know, and he had the sticky note in there, no cuts.
I can think of a cut that could have been made, admittedly, but
it was one cut. No, I don't think that Spirited Away was released by Disney. I could be wrong on that. I think this is the first one. And then, of course, Disney has gone and licensed, you know, all the movies and released them. But since then, all the movies have, like, that license has lapsed, and those movies are now owned by Warner Media and released through HBO. And they may also be releasing new editions on DVD. I actually don't know that. I feel bad for not knowing that, but whatever. I know that if you want to see these movies, you have to subscribe to HBO Max in America. So that's that. But anyway,
at this point in history, subscription services are turning out to be like having a really, really obnoxious keychain. Like, okay, I'm going through this key here and this key here. There's like 12 of them on this giant ring. You're like, which one opens the door so I can watch this goddamn movie?
I know. The wonderful, privileged first world problems we have. It's glorious. But they really can be a pain in the ass at times. But look, I got sidetracked. I have the DVD box here in my hand. There's no quote on it. Which is weird for a movie that says a Hayao Miyazaki film, you know, released in the wake of like a year after the Spirited Away film won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. Well, it was for 2002, but it was awarded in 2003. And so then the next year, this movie comes out, and there's no quote on the box. There's no one praising the movie. You know, maybe that's because of the quality of the movie. We'll let you know how we feel about that very shortly. But Shadon, if you could get a quote on this box to sum up your feelings of the movie, what would you say? What would it be?
Very moving, and so was the castle.
My emotions were like the castle.
It moved, and then it all fell apart.
Fiery at their core. And if I did, but you know what? That is actually not a bad metaphor. I salute you. Yeah. What would I say? I would say that it is a beautiful, if somewhat troubled film that is worth seeing and worth sitting with to think about, and kind of absorbing its emotional tones and meditating on that rather than thinking about it as a particularly cohesive or effective narrative film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If I had a criticism, I will get out there right now. It's the film's pacing is weird. It feels like a lot happens in a very short amount of time, and then suddenly there's long stretches where it's not so much goes on. And yeah, like characters like shift in their relationships very quickly, particularly in terms of Sophie and Howl's relationship and how she feels towards him. Now, that might not be, to you, listener at home, a problem, depending on how you feel about the idea of fairy tale romance. It, to me, was just something I noticed, but it didn't ultimately bother me all that much. Otherwise, I think the film is pretty fantastic. Although, I have seen what it attempts to do done better in other Ghibli films. It's not as good at anti-war, I would say, as Laputa, for example. Although it does have its own unique twist on anti-war sentiments and themes, which I think is interesting and worth examining, and how it ties together also with the idea of age and aging and being your true self. It's visually arresting, but if I ever said that about a Ghibli film, I think people would probably tilt their head and, like I just described, the sky as blue, or, hey, did you know there's oxygen in the air? My God. Yeah, a very Captain Obvious statement there, I would say. So, there's also, I mean, the romance stuff I think also has been done better elsewhere with other characters who, usually the men actually specifically are the mythological ones. I mean, for example, I would say Spirited Away has a better love story in that, even if it is between essentially two children. One that's also more properly paced as well. But the thing is, like the titular castle, Howl's is more than the sum of its parts. There are individual things one could criticize about each of the elements in the film, but I think they come together very well in the end.
Okay. You may be wondering, who's Howl? Who's Sophie? What is Shadon even talking about? Because you may be tuning into this podcast. I highly doubt this is true, but it could be that you're coming to this and you have not seen this film. So the way that we usually do these is we expect people to have seen what we're talking about. It would be highly beneficial to you if you watch it. We will not be able to keep from spoiling the film. I don't think. I think we are definitely going to spoil it when we get into the weeds of our discussion. And probably I will spoil some things about this book. I'm not going to spoil the ending of the book. Definitely don't want to do that. And by the way, I misspoke when I said the author's name. It's not Diana Wynne Jones. It's Diana. Apologies. Diana Wynne Jones. But I will not be able to help myself in talking about the differences between the novel and the film here. But just in case, you're listening and you're already here, you haven't seen the movie, you're like, I want to know if I should see the movie. I'm listening to this podcast to get some kind of recommendation from you. What is this movie about? Here's the summary, a very brief summary from the back of my Disney 2004 DVD. In Hayao Miyazaki's latest animated masterpiece, Journey Beyond Imagination, and enter a breathtaking fantasy world, unquote, Kenneth Turan, Los Angeles Times. There was a quote. but it's just buried in the copy. Usually when people do that, they like put it in a larger font and shunt it off to the side so that your eye is drawn to it. Why are they burying this quote in the copy here?
I didn't realize the DVD was also an eyesight test. Does it have the individual rows of letters on the back?
It does. It does. And
A-I-Z.
Oh no. Oh, that's we have, after this pod, we have to get you new glasses. That's a terrible job that you've done there.
I mean, I know I can't see your DVD from all the way over here across the Atlantic Ocean. Clearly, my glasses are not to par.
You can't drive. Don't drive a motor vehicle between now and the time that I get to you to fix this.
It's okay. I can't drive anyway, so it's probably for the best I don't, regardless.
A journey beyond imagination, a breathtaking world filled with adventure, humor, and heart. Sophie, a quiet girl working in a hat shop, finds her whole life thrown into turmoil when she is literally swept off of her feet by a handsome but mysterious wizard named Howl. The vain and vengeful Witch of the Waste, jealous of their friendship, puts a spell on Sophie. In a life-changing adventure, Sophie climbs aboard Howl's magnificent flying castle? Wait a minute. I mean, I guess it sort of flies, technically speaking, right? I mean, but if it just walks around on chicken legs, I feel like, can it fly?
I get the
Can
impression.
this castle fly?
I get the impression that the critic you're referring to here possibly watched the version of the film where all the scenes were placed out of order.
No. So this is not a critic. This is a summary on the back of the box. The quote was over long ago. I'm now getting into copy that's just on the back of the box, the Disney box. This castle does not. I mean, it has the little flippers on the back, the little dragon.
The very,
ears.
very end.
But it floats down. It flies in the way that, like, I don't know, maybe if you threw an ostrich off of a high surface, it could like cushion its fall by flapping its wings. This castle does not fly.
It does at the very, very end of the film.
Does it? I guess it does.
It's in the sky at the end of the film. But this person,
right.
as I say, seems to have watched the version of the film in which the scenes were completely out of order.
But they're just giving it away. I don't like that they call it a flying castle. It's a moving castle. It's a ramshackle shuffling castle. Okay, let's see. Where was I? Got to get through this. In a life-changing adventure, Sophie climbs aboard Howl's magnificent flying castle and enters a magical world on a quest to break the spell. Featuring the voice talents of Gene Simmons. No, not that Gene Simmons. Different, not Gene Simmons of Kiss, but an older actress who lends her talents to play Sophie in certain scenes. Jean Simmons, not Gene Simmons.
It's okay because the Gene Simmons of Kiss plays the younger version of Sophie, right?
Correct. Yes. They're also uncredited performance, unfortunately, but he did a fantastic job. He should be more vocal about this. Christian Bale, who plays Howl, Lauren Bacall, Blythe Danner, and Billy Crystal, who plays Calcifer. Can I just say that if this movie were made today and they were casting it, it would not be Billy Crystal. It would absolutely be John Mulaney playing Calcifer. Absolutely, they would do that. Miyazaki's artistry comes to life on DVD with inventive characters, unique storytelling, and richly detailed animation. And that concludes the summary. So, girl in a hat shop, swept off her feet by Howl, cursed by the Witch of the Waste out of jealousy, and then she's turned into an old woman, and then she kind of sets off on a journey, ends up in Howl's castle, and she meets everyone there. They kind of have a little family. She falls in love with Howl, and things happen. War and anti-war messages occur, and then the film kind of abruptly ends. And that's the plot in the most nutshell of nutshells of Howl's Moving Castle. Did I miss anything?
No, not really, beyond the fact that we need to, of course, declare right at the top of this podcast that Calcifer is the best boy.
Calcifer is extremely good.
Calcifer is great.
Yeah, unequivocally one of the best characters, if not the best character.
Yeah, why can't I have my own little fire demon keeping my place warm? I mean, just a little background here. My boiler was broken recently for a solid 10 days. It was one of the most insufferable experiences I've had in my adult life. And this all could have been solved by a little sass-talking flame just popping in there and making all the water warm. But did I get one? No! What kind of a shitty, crappy ass timeline do we live in when I don't get my own little fire demon? I mean, I've got a heart, but it's not doing me any good being in my body. Oh, what's it going to do? Pump blood around? No, I'll give it to that little fire demon and he can keep me warm. God fucking damn it. I hate this reality. It sucks.
So the first thing you have to do is move to Wales. And then go back to school and study magics. And then you'll be able to enter the world of Howl and catch a shooting star and you'd have yourself a fire demon. It's very doable for you. You live in Great Britain.
I mean, there's two reasons I'm not going to do that. One of which is I am not a UK weatherman, and therefore I cannot pronounce incredibly long Welsh town names. And secondly, I also remember that Wales was a guilty party in the creation of something that pops in my head when you were describing Howl's before, which was, of course, Ghazi's Wing. A work that I wish had been adapted in a way where it was more, deviant from its source material, and also not crap. So, yeah, no thanks.
Oh God, some of the same haircuts in this movie as
Wales, you fools!
Wait. Oh, unbelievable. The audiobook version of Howl's Moving Castle. For reasons we will get into, as well as aesthetically pleasing ones. The several characters have Welsh accents, and so when I read Howl's name, instead of just hearing it as Howl the way that you or I would say it, I hear Howl. I hear it at that Welsh accent. Very strongly now. Howl is now a 2-syllable word for me, basically, rather than a 1-syllable word. So I guess we'll talk about the film's creatives here briefly. And I'm going to do, I think, a bad thing, but it's a thing that will keep the runtime on this, which is probably going to be long, but it's going to keep it shorter. And I will just say that for Hayao Miyazaki, who is the director and the screenwriter, chief adapter of this movie, if you want to know more about him and his start, there are so many great places that you can go. But if you just want to stay in the realm of this podcast, we have talked about Miyazaki at great length on our Laputa/Laputa Castle in the Sky episode. So go there and seek that out. Same for Joe Hisaishi, who did the music to this movie. And it is an excellent score. In my opinion, not his best, but it's still quite effective and affecting in the context of the movie. Do you agree or disagree?
I like the music well enough, but it didn't really stick in my mind after the fact, to be quite honest. But I mean, it's the usual Studio Ghibli whimsy, which is always delightful to just immerse yourself in. So, yeah, it was perfectly fine. It was good music.
Yeah. Same for producer Toshio Suzuki. We talked about Suzuki at greater length in our previous Ghibli episode on Laputa and probably Princess Mononoke too. We also did an episode on Princess Kaguya, but that will have less to do with Miyazaki and Suzuki and more to do with Takahata. But a couple people I did want to talk about. Firstly, Diana Wynne Jones, like I said, the author of the book that this was adapted from, not the only work of hers to be turned into an anime. Have you heard of Earwig and the Witch?
It rings the vaguest of bells in my brain, but otherwise I don't know all that much about it.
Yeah. So it is, I believe it came out last year, in fact. Yes.
Oh,
it was
of course,
screened in Japan.
Yes, that's right. It was Ghibli's like first CG movie, like if I recall correctly.
They did a TV series in CG as well. Ronja or Ronya, I don't know how to pronounce. And the flower, it's like Ronja the Flower's Daughter or Ronja and the Flower's Daughter. Anyway, that's a TV thing. But yeah, I think that's right. I think this is the first or one of the first. It's an 82-minute thing. It's called a special on Anime News Network rather than a film. Despite that, it was first screened in 2020 at a film festival. But it came out in Japan in, I think, late 2020. But it's over here now. I think it came out over here last year. And you could see that. It's directed by Miyazaki's son, Goro, who has lent his directorial talents to other Ghibli films. I would say, like, varying success on his directorial outings. Like, he directed Tales from Earthsea, which is another adaptation of a British author, Ursula Le Guin's series. I have not seen that film, but I haven't really heard anybody ever go to bat for it as a good movie. So I'm kind of scared to see it. I have, however, seen the more recent From Up on Poppy Hill. That is a great movie.
Yeah.
That movie is fantastic. That is a Miyazaki Goro movie. And also Goro Miyazaki, I believe, designed the Studio Ghibli Museum, which, by all accounts, is a roaring success.
Do all of the safety signs in the museum have that one picture of Miyazaki just leaning back, looking like he's going through the worst time of his life? Like, don't smoke, and then it's just or else you'll upset Miyazaki. Like, no littering. Just
like have the meme and just replace like the word anime with any other word. Like, smoking was a mistake.
All garbage
was a mistake.
All trash is trash. Please put it in the bin.
Right. Very good. Very, very good. So yeah, so she's the original creator of Earwig and the Witch. I believe she's still with us. She was born in 1934. But Anime News Network. Oh no, I'm sorry. She passed in 2011. Apologies. But she did get to see the Hayao Miyazaki adaptation of her work come to life. They got to speak about it, I believe, over cake. They had an in-person conversation, which is a novelty in today's world. But they had one of those over some cake, and she said it was delightful. And yeah, so I'm glad she got to see her work turned into a Ghibli film.
Yeah.
That has to be pretty excellent.
It is. I just want one quick observation. This isn't like a talking point or anything, but something that just has occurred to me, even though I really should have instinctively known this all along. But Ghibli's like choice of material to adapt when they're not making original works is very... It crosses a lot of different parts of the world.
Yes.
For example, I haven't seen it yet, but The Secret World of Arrietty, if I recall correctly, is based on The Borrowers.
That is correct.
Yep. Laputa itself, of course, has its origins in Gulliver's Travels. We also, of course, have this film, which is, again, based on a novel from... Was Diana herself Welsh? She was from Britain, I know that much. Great Britain. I just can't recall if she was specifically Welsh or not. But anyway,
so she was born. She was born in London. I don't actually know what country she sort of if she's, claims to be an English person, Welsh, whatever, but she was born in London.
Well, at least she wasn't born in the city of London. That would be unfortunate. But anyway, so no, actually really intrigued by the idea, like where they seem to find a common element of wonder and a little bit of whimsy occasionally in works, regardless of what part of the hemisphere they come from. Now, I'd have to really go through the entire list and just categorize like where, one, if it's original material or if it's adapted material, and if the latter, what country does that originate from, what culture and such. But I think that I'm personally not really aware of any other Japanese studio that goes exploring, for want of a better phrase, for material to adapt. Because if you'd have told me back before 2004 and I was less of a, ignoramus, that Studio Ghibli, most principally known for their Japanese like stories and such as Grave of the Fireflies, were going to do an adaptation of Howl's Moving Castle from the novel by Diana, I'd have been like, nah, no way, I don't buy that. They probably don't even know it exists. But it just goes to show, like, I think that also, to round this off in a kind of lesson thing, one of the things that I often hear that you should embrace as a creator, for example, if you're a writer, is to consume fiction from many different mediums and cultures, and of many different topics and genres, for that matter. And it seems that Ghibli, as a studio, has embraced that ideology throughout their history, given the wide range of material that they've adapted from different places. I mean,
no doubt.
We've got Howl's Moving Castle, for example, but they also did The Wind Rises, which was a semi-biographical story of a Japanese fighter pilot designer whose name I can't remember. It's a very long time since I've seen that, but nonetheless, that's kind of the gamut you can run there, of course, in their material. So yeah, it's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, and Miyazaki definitely is a lover of this stuff, both in terms of stories and also just aesthetics and architecture. Like, the man loves European architecture.
Yeah.
You could tell that from this movie. But Takahata, Takahata also loved like a different, like a variety of stories from all parts of the world. Because, we've talked about the Tale of Princess Kaguya, which is of course based on like the woodcutter's tale, which is a very old fable. But then you have like, if you look before the formation of Studio Ghibli, Takahata was doing things like, I believe he directed that World Masterpiece Theater's Heidi of the Alps, which is a more like a story set, definitely not in Japan. So yeah, that runs throughout the studio and their DNA. And Arrietty the Borrower is just directed by neither Miyazaki nor Takahata. It's a different director whose name I don't have in front of me. But
his name was Arrietty. It was his secret world that he was showing off.
Mr. Arrietty-san. Yes. So no, that's an excellent observation. And I think good advice for aspiring creators.
Yeah.
Heck, not even aspiring, active create, like people that are making shit.
Or even if you're just a critic like me, or an amateur critic, or whatever you want to call it. But I mean, if you want any more evidence of how successful that can be in, consuming the media of many different cultures and countries, we are, of course, talking about Studio Ghibli here, who I don't think they've ever, to my knowledge, put out a work where the consensus of it is that it's actually outright bad. I mean, you mentioned Earthsea before, and you said like people weren't very warm on it, but I wouldn't get the impression that people outright dislikes it. I think probably the film of theirs I think people would dislike the most, from my understanding, is probably Grave of the Fireflies. And not because it's a bad film, quite the opposite, but just because it's brutal, I would say.
Well, yeah, by people, it depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so I think general audiences usually like a lot of their films, but like, I know that there are prominent Japanese critics who like had just like as the work of Studio Ghibli progressed, especially in like the 2000s, maybe early 2010s. Well, no, it'd just be the 2000s. There were people that went after the like Mamoru Oshii, director of Ghost in the Shell, stuff like that. He like just ripped Ponyo to shreds.
I mean, he would know. It. He would know you can't make an omelet without breaking a few angels' eggs.
You're right. Oh my god. And I have this article in front of me. Also, let's see. Shunsuke Sugita is I don't anyway. Shunsuke Sugita is cited as calling Howl's Moving Castle, quote, a failure. And I think that's probably increased over time. Like, Howl's is actually Miyazaki's at the time of the writing of a book called Miyazaki World by Susan Napier, which was written in 2018. So fairly recent. And I think this still holds true. Howl's is Miyazaki's highest grossing film overseas. So in the beginning, a lot of people saw it, and I think a lot of people really liked it at first. And that was when his popularity over here in America, and probably the UK as well, was like really cresting and coming to the fore. Like, oh man, people, Mononoke was this huge thing. It was this like, that was when he came onto the scene for us all over here for Hollywood in the late 90s. And then Spirited Away, he's got the Oscar. He's at like the peak of his powers. And then his next movie, everybody's got to see it because it's from the Spirited Away guy. But I believe over time, sentiment has probably turned against this movie a little bit. And I think that's fair to an extent. I would say my feelings on it are overall positive.
Same.
Yeah, but I understand the criticisms, and we'll get into it. It's funny, like sitting here looking at this essay about Howl's and talking about Spirited Away and kind of the popularity of Miyazaki. The movie Howl's, being his highest grossing film overseas, it happened with no marketing.
Wow.
He was so angry. Miyazaki, as you know, can be an angry man.
Oh, yeah.
He was very, very angry at this time for a couple of reasons. One, is like there was this idea that started to bubble up that like Spirited Away won its award because of the marketing campaign behind it, because people saw it, not because it was, that was, I guess people wouldn't say it wasn't good, but they would say like the number one factor in its success is the marketing. And Miyazaki even asked some of his own people in the studio, like, do you think it's the marketing was the number one? If you had to make a list of reasons why this movie was as successful as it was, marketing or because it was good art? People were like, the marketing? And then he was like, well, forget this. Howl's, no marketing. We're not doing any marketing. I'll show you.
Howl's word of mouth.
Yes. So very, very little marketing. They put his name on the movie, obviously. And it still did fine in Japan. And, like I said, it did really well over here and elsewhere. But that just is an interesting story.
Film Marxists hate him. Seven secrets to Miyazaki's financial success. There's your clickbait article.
There you go. And like the production of this movie, it wasn't necessarily, I don't think it was like troubled in the way that people talk about troubled productions today. Like schedule fires, and no one can get anything turned in on time, and people quitting or dying, starving. Nothing like that is happening at Ghibli. But originally, the person that was going to direct this movie was someone who was still working at Ghibli at the time. Someone who is very much not working at Ghibli, and very much is compared to Ghibli a lot, but is kind of doing his own thing, and that's Mamoru Hosoda.
Yes. Who recently released Belle, if I recall correctly.
You do.
I do. I saw that recently. It was very good.
You've seen it. That's cool. I'm really behind on my Hosoda viewing. I haven't seen his last 3 movies. I haven't seen the Boy and the Beast, nor is it Mirai?
It might be Mirai. It's funny, now that I've just suddenly remembered Belle, I would argue you could make a number of comparisons between that and this very film, particularly in relation to Belle's relationship with the Beast, the titular Beast. But I will not go into that here. Belle is good. I would recommend it. If you like Summer Wars, you will like Belle for much of the same reasons.
Wolf Children, still the best. Still my favorite. Having only seen 3 or 4 of his movies. But no, man cut his teeth at Ghibli, so I understand the comparison. But he was supposed to direct Howls. And, they got a whole team together. He took a trip for to observe things and give visual inspirations with the team to Europe, and they're doing their thing. And Miyazaki, this is so funny, man, looking back, because he should have wanted that, because it was very much on his mind that Ghibli cultivate the next set of creative talents, and not just have him and Takahata making everything, but get people ready to take the studio forward and keep the industry kind of in the place that it was. Well, lo and behold, in 2003, Miyazaki swooped in and took over the project. And that is one of the things, I think this probably the straw that broke the camel's back with Hosoda. And it wasn't too much longer before he got out of Ghibli to do his own stuff.
I like how you described Miyazaki as swooping in, because all I can imagine is it's just played out like an episode of Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, except with animators instead.
Work this out for me. How would it go?
Who
would he be screaming at? Who would he put between 2 pieces of bread?
It won't be 2 pieces of bread. It would be 2 animation cells.
Sure. Oh my goodness.
A Bacchus sandwich.
Yes, very good. But no, he comes in to take care of it. And another reason he was really, really angry at this time was because of the war in Iraq. That was going on right as this was happening in 2003. It's why he did not go to America in person to accept the Oscar.
Can I just say, I have mad respect for Miyazaki for that, for having principles, for not following the pack at the time, because everyone was based hey, there's only one way of thinking when it comes to. Obviously there were people who were dissenting and rightly pointing out the whole thing was a fucking con job. But still, kudos to Miyazaki for having principles and integrity. I can absolutely respect that. Even if you were absolutely terrible as a creator, which he is not, that's still something that I think is an admirable trait in a person.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can feel the anger that he had in this movie Howls, or at least in parts of it. It's a little bit of a movie with multiple personalities and multiple tones. But when it wants to seethe about war, it does so very strongly. It reflects Miyazaki's feeling on this score. But I have strayed far from what we were talking about, which was creatives. Pardon me. I'll just be brief then with the next couple. Akihiko Yamashita. Yamashita is the character designer and animation director for this movie. And what a CV, Shadon. Let me just go through some of this with you because it's pretty fascinating. So in the non-anime world, Yamashita is animation director for acclaimed. Well, it is acclaimed critically. I don't know how much commercial success it has, but critical darlings, JRPGs, Suikoden 1, 2, and 3.
Ooh.
Very good games, all three of those. Not the fourth one. I do not endorse Suikoden 4. This podcast absolutely does not do that. Character designer for Giant Robo, an OAV that I feel like I've been saying for years we should cover it on this show. Because I think you would really, really like it. And there's an interesting story behind it. It's very, very good. Yamashita was the character designer. We'll see Howl's Moving Castle. Mary and the Witch's Flower. That's not Studio Ghibli, but it was formed by a breakaway Ghibli employee or several. Hiromasa Yonebayashi is the director of that. And I want to say Yonebayashi was involved with Ghibli before that. Yeah, they directed When Marnie Was There, which is a late Ghibli movie. And did some animating for My Neighbors the Yamadas. Yeah, so Yonebayashi was a Ghibli person who broke away to make this other studio. But nonetheless, character design from Yamashita for this movie. Character design for a really underrated and fun, probably forgotten largely now, baseball anime Princess Nine. And Secret World of Arrietty, which we've already mentioned. Whoops, don't highlight those. Let's see, there was something else. I was got Tales from Earthsea, another Ghibli. And Shadon's favorite entries in this list, Erotsky Doji 1 and 2.
What?
The character designer.
Okay, so was he responsible for Dick Monster number 1 or Dick Monster number 2? I'd like some distinction on this, please.
Probably had input on all of them. Legends of the Overfiend and Demon Womb.
When you're literally responsible for a bag of dicks.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man. So that's Yamashita. Just a shout out to a couple of the seiyuu here for Sophie Hatter and Howl. Howl. Sophie Hatter was played by Chieko Baisho. And Baisho is also, let's see, so she did older Sophie. So she's in stuff like The Fantastic Adventures of Unico, Jungle Emperor Leo, the original Mobile Suit Gundam movie trilogy. But she's also in Weathering with You. She is Fumi Tachibana in that film. So not a big CV, but one that they could be proud of as far as anime voice acting credits, credited by Anime News Network. And then you have Takuya Kimura. And Kimura is the voice actor for Yagami Takayuki in the video games Judge Eyes, aka Judgment, and Lost Judgment. Very, very beloved side games in the Yakuza franchise. And in addition to voice acting Howl, he was in a little movie called Redline as JP. So,
sorry,
there you go.
I'm thinking back to watching Redline now. That is
what a movie. What a movie.
That is a film that will cause you to grow a beard watching it, but you will then experience like an accelerated sense of linear time in such a way that your beard that grows from watching the film will fall away, and you'll grow really old. But then you'll grow young again, and you'll grow another beard. And by the end of it, you're back to normal, but you feel like you've just passed through like 3 lifetimes worth in maybe 20 minutes.
Yes, I concur. Although my wife cannot stand looking at it. She hates the way it looks.
Yeah, I think depending, and I'm not saying this like if you to be derisive towards the people who aren't into it, but I think depending on who you are, watching that film can feel like you're being physically assaulted. Or rather, like someone's constantly just shaking you by the shoulders.
Well, yeah. I think it's just the color design and the character that really. I forget who she compared it to. It's kind of a comic artist. I can't remember his name, but she was like, it just makes me think of this, and I think that's unpleasant. So like, fair play. I can't. What am I gonna say? That's enough about Redline. I enjoy Redline. The last thing I wanted to say about creatives is I feel like we should give a creative shout out to a city, to a place in this in this one, and that is Alsace. Alsace is this cultural region. It's what Wikipedia refers to as a territorial collectivity.
Wow.
That is in eastern France on the west bank of the Upper Rhine. It's next to Germany and Switzerland. And over the years, the control of it has bounced back and forth between France and Germany down the centuries. Currently, I want to say French. It says it's a French region. You may history buffs out there may be familiar with the name Alsace-Lorraine, which is part of the German Empire, and it's the same or similar region. The border might be slightly different, but anyway, currently, as of 2017, it had like almost 2 million people. And so if you look at pictures of Alsace, you will understand. You will be like, wow, I'm just walking around through Market Chipping here as depicted in Howl's Moving Castle.
Yeah,
this is
absolutely
incredible. So
absolutely. Yeah, the aesthetic of the town that Sophie lives in this film is very much a pastiche of Franco and German or French-German aesthetics. I actually want to point out as well, just before we get into talking points later, something I want to make particular emphasis on is that this film, and I can't say if this is true for the book or not, but the film specifically, to my knowledge, is very unspecific about a lot of world-building details, like what's the name of the country that Sophie is a part of? Not specified. The town? Not specified either. You get like names of shops, for example, but in short, there is a lack of specificity in this film, a lack of like intimate detail for a lot of like the world-building elements. I will bring that up later when we get to talking points, but I felt it was worth mentioning. Even though I think the book may potentially have been set in Wales originally. I'm not 100% sure.
Yes and no. We'll talk about this when we talk about Twitter questions. There's someone who just lets the cat out of the bag on this, and we'll go into all kinds of gory details. Well, that's all I have for the creatives. Like I said, to see our other podcasts, or do yourself one better, a real expert on the bigger personalities at Studio Ghibli, and how they got their career started, what they're famous for, the production around this movie, all that sort of thing. Could definitely recommend people like Susan Napier, Helen McCarthy, the Anime World Order podcast. for that kind of historical detail. Or, if you want bits and pieces of that, you can listen to our other Studio Ghibli podcasts. Now, it's time, I believe, for correspondence. We've gotten a number of questions from our Discord and Twitter. If you'd like to become a member of our Discord, you can head over to our Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/WARUIDESHOU, Ko-fi.com/Watery Deshou, and give us a little donation there, a small cup of coffee, and as support for us, and as thanks for that, you can have Discord access to our lovely, cozy, friendly little Discord server, where we have lots of fun times, fun chats, game nights, group watches. There's like anime sampler that's done on the weekends where folks get together and watch a bunch of first episodes of stuff. It's a lot of fun. Definitely worth tossing in a couple bucks for a lifetime membership. So yeah, coffee.com/waterydesho. But we got a bunch of questions to get to. So I will hand it over to Shadon, who is the traditional reader of questions.
Okay, then let me put my question reading glasses on here. They're distinct from my regular reading glasses. So, first question here comes from Rackham of Kings. That's Johnny Rackham, one of our Discord members. If you had a version of the castle's magic door, what locations would you want it linked to, and what would your castle be disguised as for those places? So before we answer this, just a little bit of context on this fun question, which is Howl's Moving Castle has a magical door with a little spinning wheel with 4 quadrants on it, which are color-coded. And when you turn the wheel to the arrow, the quadrant in question that's color-coded will change the door to open to a new location. So that's how Howl's manages to maintain a shop in 4 different cities simultaneously.
It looks like a Simon that Miyazaki has created. This is not in the book. The doorknob does have 4. If you look at the doorknob in the movie, you can see it's also colored. But in the book, he just puts paint blobs on the doorknob, and depending on what side is down, that's where you go. But I feel like the little Simon wheel is actually a great invention, and I would want that in my version of Howl's Moving Castle that we're about to talk about.
Absolutely. So where would I want it linked to? Well, let's do this in order then. Five Guys, Nando's, Wagamama, and Pizza Hut.
No TGI Fridays.
It's not always Friday, mate.
I mean, it can be for your moving castle.
This is true if it moves in time as well as space, but I don't know that for certain. Although then again, there is a bit of time travel in this film, which we'll get to eventually. No, in all seriousness, like it would probably be some places I was very fond of, like for drinking and eating. But yeah, my joke answer is those slightly above average quality fast food chains. As for what my castle would be disguised as for those places, spooky toilet that no one goes into.
From listeners.
Yeah, spooky toilet that no one goes into. You don't want anyone, like, I mean, the thing is, right, I appreciate the idea behind having the it serve as a shop for Howl's services, but I'm not a shopkeeper or an owner. I don't want 4 different people knocking on and trying to sell me cavity loft insulation. So I want it to be as unappealing as possible, so that way would-be callers don't feel inclined to show up. It would, however, make getting takeaway delivery really awkward. I'd have to remember which position I programmed into my phone. Like, oh shit, I've got to switch it over. Oh no, I do.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. That could, if you're a big, I don't know what is DoorDash a thing in the UK?
There's Deliveroo and Uber Eats and whatnot.
Okay, so you have Uber Eats, yes. Say DoorDash is just a same thing by another name that is used here. And yeah, if you use that, then I could see this creating some issues. Would you not have it pop out by your work, or do you think that would be like a waste? Would you want to cut down on the work commute?
Nah, I work from home most of the time anyway. So unless I literally had the door inside my bedroom to go to my office, and then it would replace the hallway, you know.
You would just be disguising it from yourself. Yeah,
yes.
That could be. Well, I mean, as someone who has a terrible commute, I would absolutely use a door to get to my place of work, which is at a university, and I would probably disguise it as just one of those buildings that looks like it used to be a dormitory, and you don't know if there are people in there or not, and it looks kind of abandoned, so no one would go in there and bother me.
So we're both of the opinion we don't ever want anyone to knock on our door ever.
For that door, unquestionably. Where else? I would want mine to pop out at probably the someplace that is equidistant from the zoo and a movie theater I quite like, and an arcade I quite like. And it would just be, I don't know, it would be a spooky toilet as well, or a portable one.
Well, you could have 4 locations on your spinny wheel for your door, so you could have all 3 locations.
Yeah, but I feel like I want to use one for leisure, and one for work, and then one for, I don't know, so probably next to a favorite restaurant like you.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So in other words, you're going to have the white segment be for White Castle then.
How dare you defame me on the podcast? You know, to be entirely transparent, we don't even have a White Castle close to. There may be one in the city somewhere. I've actually never looked. The only White Castle I've ever had is the kind that they sell you at the grocery store and you put in your freezer. Up in the microwave later.
I am shocked. Like, White Castle is too good for Tennessee? Holy shit.
There could be one in the city somewhere, and I just have never, it's just never been something that's either near or desired. I'm going to Google it.
It too, I imagine, is probably hidden inside what looks like a spooky toilet.
Oh yeah, no, there's like 2 in Nashville. I just I'm never at those locations. So, and if you were, why would you choose White Castle over the copious other superior dining options?
I mean, they missed a trick not marketing this film. It could have been Howl's Moving White Castle.
God damn it. I'm only just... How did I not think of this long before you said it? Why is it striking me now?
Because your brain doesn't like to poison itself?
Oh, man. That would be incredible. Harold and Kumar's Moving White Castle.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, no. I don't want to imagine the moving castle itself stoned and just... No, Calcifer would be the one who's stoned. Of course he would be.
Yeah, 100%. Yes. Which of the wastes is the dealer?
Jesus Christ.
Okay, moving on. Thank you, Rackham.
Okay, then. Next pair of questions comes from Gogo Toy Robot. The first of which is, what is your favourite whimsical / magical moment in the film? There's so many good ones that it's difficult to choose. But I think the one I'm probably going to go with is when Howl and Sophie, he's helping her walk in the air. Mm-hmm. That one is really, really good. For one, I think it serves a nice moment to introduce her to the world of magic, where she kind of, sort of is, well, I mean, she's walking in the air being held up by a random dude who picks her up, off the street to escape some, tar spies that are after her.
The toy soldiers.
Yeah. They're like Shy Guys, except that they're also spies basically.
Yes,
Spy Guys. There you are. We'll call them Spy Guys. But like, I think it's like it's literally her first steps into a world of magic she has previously been completely unaware of. But it's also just a good little moment of bonding for the two of them, and it helps establish Howl's character, where he's just like, maybe quasi kidnapping this poor woman off the street, even if it is to help like her escape the spy guys, is a bad idea. But I'm Howl, and I'm a child at heart. Why not? She'll enjoy it, and yeah, it was a charming little moment that I thought, especially as she gets more used to it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. This is not a very whimsical one, but I actually really was struck in this film by the shot after the castle has been totally destroyed the second time. And all that remains is the door. And the camera is sort of behind Sophie and the door frame, and it's just facing her back, and she opens the door and goes in. Like, I was really, really, really struck by that shot. I thought that was an incredible shot. I guess more whimsical. I really like when the Scarecrow does things. I like the Scarecrow a lot better in the movie. There's less to the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow is actually kind of a complicated character in the book, plot wise, not necessarily personality wise, but yeah, I just enjoy him as just a complete like delight and just a good lad who likes Sophie and wants to help her. And when he like helps her kind of get a walking stick and then run up to the castle, and get on the back entrance. That was quite lovely. And,
I have two observations to make about the Scarecrow from what you said. Mr. Turniphead, as he's called.
Yes, that's right.
The first of which is that you mentioned that he has a much more complicated character in the book. Now, I haven't read the book, so I can't really compare one way or the other.
Well, the plot around him, I mean, as a character,
that's
basically the same. Only his motivations are very unclear throughout most of the book.
Yeah, the stuff surrounding him then. But the point being, though, like the simplicity of the character and the simplicity surrounding him in the film, I think is actually an asset for what the film is trying to get across. And again, I'm being vague and mysterious, as I often am, but I'll get to that later. But yeah, for me, I think it works in the context of the film that he doesn't have much to him. And additionally, every time he's like jumping from one place to another, all I can think to myself is just hearing the Jack Frost from the Persona series going hee-ho.
See, I think about Scrooge and DuckTales, the NES game. Pogoing around.
Oh no, the pogo noise from Commander Keen, that also works as well.
But the Scarecrow's lovely. The ending shot is really, really, really great. I think, the ending of the film has problems, but the final shot of them, like, dressed up in their new outfits, Sophie and Howl. Sophie restored to her normal self apart from her hair color. They embrace and kiss each other on I don't know what it is you call that thing. But anyway, it's a little plank they can walk down with railing on it. And then the camera zooms out and the castle's, flying through the sky, and it's really beautiful.
By the way, one small thing that I really liked about that moment, Sophie, of course, we're introduced to her working in a hat shop, and she has a hat for a brief time, and it's the most plain and ordinary thing ever, and then she spends most of the film without a hat, and then she ends the film with a hat. And it's beautiful. She has a lovely new outfit in general. It's how it bookends like her character as she's travelled and changed throughout all of these story up to that point. It's a nice little detail.
Oh, her running through the field in Howl's past with the falling stars.
Yeah.
And sees him put one into his own body. And just her running across the field and the light in the background and the stars crashing to the surface. It's an incredible shot.
Absolutely. Right. Should we move on to the next question? Cool. Next question from Gogo Site Robot is, what are your thoughts on the romantic aspects of the film? Okay. I am mixed on this.
Me too.
Because on the one hand, I think, as I said before, a problem with the romance between Howl and Sophie, from my perspective, is that it's paced a bit poorly, in my opinion. We kind of go from having maybe an inkling that she might kind of sort of like him to outright stating that she loves him in the end of either the first act or halfway through the second act of the film.
Mm-hmm.
It feels very early as far as the declaration of that goes, where they haven't had much time to really hang out together. Now, of course, Sophie spends much of the film under a curse and makes her look older than she actually is. Not that I think plays a stiff impact. I think Howl, although it's never really stated as such, sees her for who she truly is, sees her for the beautiful person she is underneath the curse, and age and aging and how one feels internally versus how one appears externally is a big part of it.
Also, he watches when she sleeps, and so he knows. It's like, oh yeah, she's a brown-haired, beautiful young girl. Awesome. Slinks back into the shadows. No, yeah. I joke. That's mostly a joke. I think Howl of the movie, I think you're correct about.
Yeah, the pacing is off, in my opinion, on this. It seems just progressively. I mean, I mentioned before Spirited Away, which in some ways mirrors that kind of journey in that we, of course, was it Chise, I think her name was?
I think that's right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then, of course, we have Haku. And they, have like a romantic thing going on in a childlike kind of way, of course. But that is paced much better over the course of the film, where the moment in which she saves him from being trapped in the dragon form that he's in, again, Moff-Eastern memory that I have, I might be wrong on the specifics, but unless like the moment where she declares her love for him happens at that same moment. Now, I'm not saying that has happened in the case of Howl's Moving Castle, the film that is, but rather the declaration of love towards him happens way too early relative to how it happens as kind of like the moment of triumph, like in that usual classic narrative arc sense, where we've conquered like our, we've conquered the challenges that set out before us, and now we, we come from that and we like get the girl or the boy in the end, Now, I'm not saying again that all films have to be structured the same way, but it just feels like a part of the problem of this film's pacing where it's said, but we don't get much time between the two to really hammer that point home, I think.
Yeah.
Now, with all that said, I did say I was mixed. On the other hand, I kind of view the romance in this film as a kind of fairy tale romance, where it's not really meant to have that kind of either narrative structure or even, it's love at first sight kind of thing, or a similar sort of elements to that, where it's not really meant to be realistic. I mean, amongst other things in the film, of course. So I am happy to take it on that basis where, yes, it happens very quickly and that is still a problem, and there's certainly other issues with it. But in terms of just like its simplicity as a fairy tale love story, I can take it in that way with that intent in mind, in that it's entirely innocent as well, at least as I see it. So I'm overall okay with it, but that, admittedly, as I say, is just my opinion. And if people were like, no, I don't care for it for a variety of reasons, I mean, I've heard this like be, a discussion of like, or rather this film be like viewed in feminist terms, where it's about like Sophie exercising her agency as a person, like even though she's old, to solve all these various problems. But then, of course, we also have the confusing messages of like, well, she spends time doing cleaning and all that. And then in the end, the goal is that she's saving Howl because she's in love with him. I'm not really going to go into all that right now because I haven't given it too much thought. But yeah, like the film, I think you said it best, Doc, is a bit of a mess in that respect. So how you ultimately feel about it is going to be up to you. It's your mileage may vary thing. I'm okay with it, but being merely okay with it is in its own way not good enough, I suppose.
Yeah, so a couple things. One, the book is substantially better at having this character Sophie be a character with an arc and a real journey that is meaningful. There's self-discovery, and there's like finding, it is all about her finding her agency and learning to acknowledge her own wants and desires and act on them. That is like a huge part of the book. And so I think the book succeeds there where the film does not. Just retreating back for a moment, I forgot to say this on the, we talked about the scene where Sophie is running through the field as shooting stars fall, and Howl captures one and puts it into his own heart. I meant to say this. I have it in my notes. I should have said it earlier, but I don't want to let the podcast in without saying this because I think this is really interesting. So I'm quoting from Miyazaki World here by Susan Napier. One of Howl's most poignant scenes is a brief flashback to when the film's wizard protagonist Howl captured a shooting star. Miyazaki had been haunted by such a vision from his college days, and he has said one of the reasons he became an animator was to create just this scene. So I think underscores that scene, not just as like a cool scene for its whimsy or world building with the time loop or whatever, but just as an important scene for Hayao Miyazaki, the person and the professional anime man.
I mean, could you not think of a more representative scene from his own library of work that encapsulates who he is as a person and what his entire studio is about?
That's a good way to put it. That's super interesting. Yeah. But on the topic of romance, returning to that, like you, I have a lot of different conflicting feelings about it. On the one hand, you could say that is actually structurally quite subversive for a fairy tale in that it has the prince, magician, boy need to be rescued, not just by a woman who's not a princess, but an old woman, which is kind of interesting. And I believe we'll have a lot to say, or at least something to say later on about the movie and the things it communicates about old age. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, there is something about this movie which screams to me that like that it's, you mentioned a fairy tale, and oftentimes fairy tales are very lacking and pretty thin in this regard. Like it feels sometimes like, what Howl needs? Howl just needs a good woman to come and help him settle down and clean house and, take care of the domesticity and kind of tame him. And what Sophie needs is, she's just too cooped up in that hat shop with her working, and she just needs a man in her life who is going to sweep her off her feet and romance her. That's what she needs in her life. And like, you could definitely see that as there and just be like, oh, I don't know. But I think that if you were feeling generous, you could look at Sophie as a cleaning lady. You could look at that a bit more metaphorically and sort of see her as someone who is rescuing this really angry anti-war radical Howl from kind of a cycle of self-destruction.
Yeah.
And like scrubbing and cleaning like his personality or his, helping him become a more whole and healthy human being rather than being someone who sweeps his floors. Like, there could be more to it. Like if you could read it as there being more to it than just that.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that pops into my head is that the film, as I say, it examines age, not just of being old, but also of being young as well, and also even childlike,
Mm-hmm.
the positives and the negatives of that. And we'll certainly talk about that when it comes to Howl and what he is trying to do with the war and intervening in it. And so I suppose one can make the argument that for all of Howl's power, like the one power that he lacks is self-discipline, which Sophie brings into his life. That could be one way of looking at it, along with what you said about cleaning out his personality. Um, it, I think the other thing as well is, I'm going to be honest here. I know that in the past I've said things like, let's not have stories be about like, hey, you've got to rely on, you end up like you got to find a man or whatever, find a woman. But the truth of it is, and admittedly, this probably doesn't really apply in this film's case, given it's not strictly speaking a realistic or grounded work. But there are people out there whose lives are improved substantially through meeting a partner. Let's not pretend that it's just a zero sum thing here, or where I met a partner but whatever. I mean, this is a strange tangent, but I recently watched My Big Fat Greek Wedding for the very first time. Wonderful, wonderful movie, by the way. And the guy in it, the lead guy named Ian, says to I think it's Togra, I think her name is, the lead Greek lady, I felt myself become alive when I met you. Now, you know what? I love that line. I love that moment. It was wonderful. It was romantic. It was heartfelt. It was charming. So I'm not going to pretend that, that there aren't stories out there that can work where, you know what? It is a love story. And the fact that they fell into a romance is a good thing, Like, they did become better people, more alive and vibrant people as a result of it. That happens to people in real life, and it happens in other works that I've seen, which I do enjoy a lot. So, yeah, I'm very mixed on it. Like, at one point I like it, and at one point I don't. Mm-hmm. It really sucks sitting on this fence. I tell you, it's making my butt hurt. I swear.
I mean, I can see, like, I can see that sentiment you just articulated. Howl saying that, right? And it being fine and good and true. I think the problem is when applied to Sophie, like, something about their relationship just feels so asymmetrical.
Like that's right.
He has so much power and independence and a whole life that he really didn't like need her, so to speak. But like she is just kind of like everything to do with her character in the movie really is like being in Howl's orbit. So I totally get it, right? If it feels like there's an imbalance there.
Yeah. By the way, her name was Tula, not Tu. I don't know why I said that. But anyway, basically your mileage is going to vary on this. I think that if people walked away from this film and said they were okay with the romance, or they even outright liked it or liked it a lot, I'd be fine with that. I mean, I can imagine there are probably women out there who may feel that they are in some equivalent position of Sophie's, where they feel like their life is in a kind of dead end and they would like to be whisked away by a dude who, helps give their life meaning and a sense of magic in it. Not literal magic, of course. I don't think there are any wizards or warlocks out there in the world that I know of. If listening on this podcast, Bow, and you are indeed a wizard or a warlock, come talk to me. Get in my DMs, because I want to learn some magic.
Ryu from Street Fighter is out there. He's a wizard.
Is he a wizard or a warlock? I'm not so sure. More a monk, I would say.
Totally a wizard. Absolutely a wizard.
Well, if he's got the beard, I suppose he is a wizard, but I'd say Gen is more perhaps a wizard in the Street Fighter series. But anyway.
Does Gen throw fireballs?
I'm more than confident he does, but this is stretching.
I can't remember. I know in Alpha 2, he was all about the countering. I don't remember if he had a projectile. My knowledge on Gen is limited to the 90s in Street Fighter Alpha 2.
God, I don't even recall myself. but anyway, yeah, I think that you're welcome to have either opinion basically on the film. It'll work for some people where they'll think to themselves, hey, you know what, like, whether you're a guy or a girl or whatever gender you may be, like you might think, hey, my life is in a dead end rut. It would be lovely if I did just meet someone who whisked me away and suddenly brought colour to the world I live in. I don't think that's an unreasonable sentiment to have. But conversely, if you think to yourself, well, as Doc said, this is very asymmetrical here, and I don't really care for Sophie's role in all of this, where she basically just has become his housekeeper. You're not wrong on that either. Everyone's right. God damn it. All right, should we move on to the next question?
Sure.
Okay, next one comes from Alex Schmidt, a long-time podcast contributor. The anime chef himself, absolute legend of a man. And he says the following: will probably come up, but how do you feel about the time loop? What works better, and what do you think loses luster upon reflection because of it?
Okay, first of all, before we answer this question, is it a time loop?
Wibbly wobbly timey wimey.
Because so Sophie does go back to the past and then leave it. But
yes,
is it a time loop? Is any time travel a time loop? I don't know if I'm comfortable with calling any time travel a time loop.
It's probably just time travel Alex is referring to. It's just a term thing. No point in getting worried about the semantics of it.
No, that's what we do. We get in the damned weeds. We worry about the semantics. It matters to us because we're a bad show that cares about dumb little details.
Nah, not this time. I'm going to just say, we'll just call it time travel. It's a colloquialism for that. Okay, how do I feel about this? Mixed again. This is the mixed grill of anime opinions, except some of it you just don't plain like. It's the chocolate box with stuff like the coconut shit that you find in a tin of roseware.
I like coconut shit. It's good. Coconut is a good flavor.
No one likes those caramel pennies you get in Quality Street. So
that's fair. You're right about that.
This is my opinion set for this film, which is basically an entire tub of mixed chocolates that some people like and some people hate. Okay, look. First off, I actually don't inherently hate time travel.
No,
I actually
of
think
course
it can
not.
be but I know some people tend to get like, time travel, Christ. Because sometimes it feels like it can be a bit of a narrative crutch, or like it's where the writer is trying to be too smart for their own good. I tend to prefer time travel when it's used to examine character, because it allows us, as writers or as authors, to pose the question of what if in a way that happens diegetically. This, of course, was a big part, for example, Steins Gate. I mean, you know about all the various time travel fiction that's out there.
You know all of it. And if you don't know all of it, go experience it, pause this podcast, and then come back to listen to Shadon.
Travel back in time to go watch it. This time travel fiction.
Yes.
Is that technically a paradox? I'm not sure.
Our podcast's all time loops.
Well, you know what? I could probably make that happen, actually, by some creative editing.
Yes. Put paradoxes
I didn't realize
in the
this podcast... This podcast is 100 hours long. What's going on? You have to then break the paradox by fast forwarding to a certain point. Anyway. So, however, like this, for a couple of reasons. I think, well, for one, we get to see the scene. Like, if you're talking purely in terms of making the plot move along, I think having the time travel element in it, above anything else, allows us to have that scene. I think it's worth it for that because, firstly, it's a wonderful scene in its own right with how it looks. It's got that, as I say, that whimsy and that kind of joy about it. But it's also very illustrative, I think, of Howl then versus now, and also what I would argue the film encapsulates as the ideal nature of the human soul, I would say. Because it's where Howl, finds a falling star and takes it into himself. Now, it is Calcifer, this star, admittedly, but nonetheless, is it not kind of wonderful and inspirational to see, and even uplifting to see a person, see the wonder of a falling star and take that into themselves and have that then, affect their life going forward in a positive way?
Yes. My answer is yes.
Okay, so yeah, having it serve its function mechanically just to allow that scene to appear is good in its own right.
Sure.
But I also think it speaks to the strength of Sophie's love, because it's she's literally traveling across time to make that clear to him. And I think also one can then take a lesson from it, because she's tried to reach Howl in the present through, like, his through, like, when he's trying to fight trying to disrupt the war efforts, but they're actually corrupting him in turn. He's being lost to rage, and maybe it's more of a warning that at some point it is indeed too late to stop someone, to save someone from being trapped in that mire. Now, how you feel about that? That it's at some point it is too late for someone to be driven back from, like, rage and hatred, and that is up to you. But I think that combined with the love element, like, I think it's actually charming in its own right that she will literally go across time in order to get that message across to him. Like, how I'll move heaven and earth to make it happen. That kind of sentiment, like, where she feels that strongly about him. So I think that works. But again, I think that if you watch this film and you came away from it feeling that you were a little cheated by it, because, like I say, that idea that at some point it is too late and you would literally have to go back in the past to give someone the push they need. That is that is problematic in its own right. Also, it means that, as you said about the asymmetry of the relationship, Howl knows who she is when he meets her at the start of the film.
That is the thing. Is like you could say that possibly the only reason that he is smitten with her is because she's this lady who fell from the sky that he saw when he was having this incredible moment in his adolescence, taking the star into him. And then he sees this beautiful lady calling out to him, promising him stuff. And then he's taken that into his head and heart and romanticized it over the years. And then he finally meets her. And it's like, if the cynic could just be like, that totally, like, takes away, like, his, I don't know, choosing to love her for who she is, like all that stuff that you would attribute to his, like, the goodness of his character, where he loved her despite her her appearance or whatever, or her age, the age difference. Like, you could say that the time stuff undercuts that. Now, that's not, like, explicitly said in the film. Like, that's just a take you could have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said before, like, if you view it as a fairy tale romance where love conquers all, then that works in this instance. I think that that's okay. Because this is where you also then might want to get to in the weeds about being a time loop, because you can view, like, the first half of the film, or the first 2/3 of it, up until she goes back in the past to find Howl when he was a child in that field. Like, you could say that prior to that point, that loop had never happened. This is the first iteration of it. And that way it is then, him liking her authentically, rather than because he, as you say, received that vision of her. It really depends on how you want to look at it. It's as I say, I'm mixed on it. it is a bit messy.
This scene is a mess.
The other thing I would argue as well, though, is, like, part of what I think makes romance what it is and makes it special is the idea of spontaneity, the blossoming of moments, the unpredictability of, like, having a conversation with someone that you're in love with, where they say something you have no idea what to expect, and you laugh at it, and you find, like, that you're learning new things about them as time goes on, all that sort of stuff. But that's absent if Howl knows who she is and knows that he's, like, already in love with her at that point, and is invisibly guiding her through all of what's going on. It doesn't feel quite as organic. It kind of dims the chemistry between the two of them a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's messy if you like it, for the reasons I've stated, or reasons of your own. That's absolutely fine. And if you don't like it for the reasons I've stated, or your own reasons, that's also fine. This really is turning into Schrodinger's fucking film, I tell you. It's the most ephemeral thing ever, and I don't want it to be. Like, I feel like, as much as I can say, like, and make concessions to at least, like, charitable interpretations, like, when we talked about Laputa, for example, we might have like quibbled a little bit about like thematic intent and whatever, but we didn't have anywhere near this level of like on the one hand, but on the left and the right, and and that clarity like of response to it, I think, and that consistency of response. I know I'm normally all for like you can have your own opinions on stuff, and that's absolutely fine, but I just wish this film wasn't as messy as it was, given everything we're discussing. As we're going along, and I'm realizing the scope of the jank of it, if you want to call it that. I wish it just had that less jank in it, basically.
I mean, in some ways, like the castle represents the movie as a narrative.
Oh, you mean it's like the Blues Brothers car where it falls apart at the end?
Yeah, and it's just made up of like nothing contiguously fits together into an aesthetically pleasing or coherent whole. It's a bunch of things kind of like duct tape and nailed together that are out of place, and you got one thing sticking out over here and things aren't lined up perfectly, and when you put them together it looks bad. And like I think the scene on its own, especially when you consider the idea that you were talking about, like her moving time and space to get to him, someone she cared about. And you just kind of think on that scene in isolation in that way. And then the sheer beauty of the animation. It's fantastic. It's an amazing scene. But when you try to like fit it into this movie, it's just a total, it's such a mess, man. Like the whole last act of the movie. Really just really all over the place. And it's, I can see why they had to have it, because the contract between Howl and Calcifer has to somehow be revealed to Sophie and elucidated. Like, and there's no inner monologues. You can't have Howl thinking about it. And neither Howl nor Calcifer can tell her. And we don't have access to Sophie's mind. There's no inner voice that you hear. It's all dialogue. And so we can't have her like inwardly deducing it. So basically we have to have her jumping back in time and seeing it happen, and then figuring it and leaving the audience to figure out the nature of it from that scene. But and then it doubles as that sort of exposition by example rather than telling, or storytelling by showing rather than telling. It's not exposition. It's actually the opposite of that. And then also it doubles as this like really emotionally resonant thing that you talked about. It's great in that regard. But man, it's a time travel being introduced in this story. What the hell, man? Just bizarre.
Yeah, your mileage may vary. Your mileage across time and space may vary, for that matter. That's my answer to it. Okay, shall we move on to the next question?
Let us.
Okay, next two questions come from Re_Q, or Riku, not Riku from Final Fantasy X or X.
You always have to say that. It's important to note.
If I don't clarify that, someone's going to ask that at the one point. Like, is that who they are? Is that what their handle is? And the answer to that is no, absolutely not. Okay, how would you compare the themes and message of Howl's Moving Castle to those of Miyazaki's other films? So there are two principal things in this film thematically, in my opinion. Potentially more, but I think there's two main ones we can point to, and they do actually weave together, in my opinion. But we'll list them anyway. One of which is, of course, war sucks. No surprise there. I didn't know. I know. Did you need a film to tell you that? The other of which is the idea of age, the inner self, and the outer self. Because when this film talks about age, it does not just refer to simply the idea of the body being old, but also the mind and the soul, or if you want to say they're both the same thing, basically. But regardless, the mind being old, the soul being old, the heart being old, that kind of thing. So let's talk about the anti-war stuff firstly. Now, this film's anti-war theme is very simple by design. And I'm okay with that in this case. I think that when you set out your stall as a creator, as an author, as a whatever, if you like sets up that you're planning on telling an incredibly nuanced story about war and the horrors of war, then obviously you would expect, as the audience would expect, a complex answer to that question. But I think that Howl's Moving Castle sets out that it's only going to take a simple look at war because it views. I mean, this is where Miyazaki's anger comes into it here, because ultimately it views the reasoning behind war, whatever it may be, as irrelevant. War is a horrific thing in of itself, and whatever justification one may have for it, it is a tragedy it ever happened to begin with. And so this is why I mentioned before the idea of the world building and how we don't know the name of the countries that are fighting with each other. We don't know why they're fighting. There is mention perhaps of the prince, the turnip head, somehow being the instigator of this, perhaps. But even then, that's only like a throwaway line, if at all. It's barely relevant to the proceedings of the film. And lastly, the war is also concluded by two simple actions. The prince saying, "I will go stop this," and
just so
Suleiman.
Wild, man. That is just
and,
poof.
Yeah, and Suleiman, that being the king's advisor, Howl's former mentor, also saying, "I will stop the war."
The dog, because
the
dog called her on video. For the dog FaceTimed her through a crystal ball.
The Palantir.
And doesn't even say anything. He's just like, "Yo, check out these happy fools on this cliffside." And then Sullivan's like, "You know what? War kind of sucks. Let's stop this nonsense." And it's just like, what is happening? Like, I don't understand what's going on and how people are thinking.
So here's the thing, right? I know that we're being like, oh my God, it's really simple. But I'm okay with that. Because in a way, I kind of agree with everything that this film says about the stupidity of war through the fact that, you know what, some people really could just stop it by saying, let's just call it a day, you know? And it doesn't matter the reasoning why between like two nations or even what nations are fighting. It is all bad all the time. Now, I'm going to elaborate more on this when we get to the idea of what I mean of like the childlike versus adult nature. I'm going to save that for a separate talking point. But overall, I'm okay with this because, as I say, I think Howl's Moving Castle is sending out its stall to say that, like, the stripped down version of anti-war is that just war is generally, no, it is just awful. There is no, like, nuance to it. It's all bad all the time, and it shouldn't happen. And you know what? I can't argue with that. But if you're coming to Howl's Moving Castle for a more complicated look at war, you're going to miss out on that, I'd say. And this is where my comparison would be to Laputa, because Laputa was very much an anti-war film, but it was expressing that through the idea of technology and creation. Now, Howl's does this as well, but it doesn't do it as well. I'm going to save how Howl's does it for a later discussion. But Laputa, in my opinion, was very clear about the idea of, hey, here's the castle in the sky with all these weapons. But as I mentioned in our Ghibli cast on that, that once all the weapons are stripped away, we're left with a product of pure beauty and wonder. That was amongst many things that that the film expressed about war, how it's entwined with human progress and development, and it's ultimately what humans choose to do with technology that makes it devastating, not that it is inherently in of itself bad. Because, you know, sometimes there are people who say, like, oh, it would be so much better if we went back to the Stone Age or whatever, or we lived a more agrarian lifestyle. And that's bullshit. The amount of wars that have been fought through history when we were an agrarian society should be evidence to that fact. And so I think Laputa handles that much better, in my opinion. So I've said my piece on that. Do you have a film that you want to bring up from the Ghibli library to compare to this?
Well, I think just on the war stuff, I think it makes sense now to go ahead and read Felling File's tweet that they sent us here. I have mixed feelings about the film since I'm an avid fan of the book, but at the same time, I don't think we can easily divorce it in the time that it was created. I think from the time it was created, which was during the insane years of Bush, post 9/11, and descent into Iraq wars. And as I, pointed out earlier, like, Miyazaki's anger about those things that were happening in the world bleeds through into the film. I will say that I think it's important to state here that none of this is in the book. Like 0.0% of the war that's happening. Well, maybe like 0.01%. There's politics, of course, that are happening, and the book has more time and devotes more time to exploring those. But there's no, like, the one time war is mentioned is sort of as a far off possibility. Like the king of Kingsbury, he is saying to Sophie he wants Howl to find his brother who's missing. Spoilers, the brother is either all or part of the Scarecrow. The brother is a good strategist, and they need him. And that's all. Like, Howl is not like this sense of justice and all the anger at war and people that make it happen and people that perpetrate it. Like, none of that is an animating force at all of the character Howl Jenkins in the book. So this is all Miyazaki. And I think I definitely appreciate it more now. Even though, it is simple, and even though it's resolved, I don't like the way it's resolved. It is way too fast, way too, to even call it clean, I think it's pretty shot. It's just really zipped up, and you have an optimism sticker slapped on that bad boy and call it a day.
Yeah.
Like, which is weird for someone who's so clearly upset by what's happening to, like, end it so quickly and put such a weird bow on it at the end is very odd. And that doesn't happen to my memory in any of the other Ghibli films that deal with war or like environmental destruction or anything like that.
Yeah, I will just add, by the way, I do overall like the idea, as I say, given the film's like simplistic approach to war, that in turn it offers a simplistic answer. Like, it doesn't set out to have a complicated view on it. I do like the idea, but I think the resolution is executed in a way where it's, again, a pacing problem where we are told that the war is over, but we're not shown it.
Yes.
Because the film pretty much goes straight to credits very shortly after that, with a very nice closing shot, as I say, of Sophie and Howl on the whatever you want to call it, of the flying castle. But we're simply told it's over and that's it. And we need really to be shown it, in my opinion. That, I think, would make it work, even if it is just simply two people independently saying, war done, bye, later. We need to have a little bit of follow-up to just show. Like, I think a montage of that would have been quite good.
For people who haven't it happens during the credits. Like, the ending song is playing in the background while this is happening to show you how quickly it's occurring and how rapidly everything is being swept under the rug and tidied up. I can't think of another movie that ends in quite this way. And I don't think it had to be that way. And so it is very strange. And I really, you mentioned like the simplicity of the view on war. I too really like it. I think that there's something weird to say this about someone who has been in the game as long and is as old as Miyazaki is at the time he makes this, but something almost punk about like the undiluted purity of emotion that you can feel from
behind it.
Like, and it's not, there's just holding nothing back. And it really is, as another tweeter will say, it does come at the expense of other aspects of the story. Like, it overshadows that stuff and shoves it out of the picture. But and that's sad for people that want to see more of the book adapted. But just as someone who's interested in Miyazaki, it is really fascinating to just see someone who has the power to do this. Just be like make this decision, which is one of many decisions which I think make the film lesser than it could be, but it's still really artistically interesting that he just puts this out there again in this really just this undiluted way. He's just like, no, this is, you know what? No one can tell me no about this. Really, I'm doing this. This is how I feel, man. It's raw. It's really raw.
Yeah. And you know what? I respect that. I mean, we've there have been many shows that we've covered like in the past on films that I thought crap. But you know what? If at least, as I say, there is an integrity of position on the part of the creator and a sincerity to it, as there is with Miyazaki, like even if it's, not as refined as it could have been, if it's not executed as well as the idea could have been handled, I can at least respect him doing it and getting out there in the way that he did. And also, as I say, context, him doing that at the time that this film came out, given that the support for, the Iraq wars was, at least in the West, as mostly universal as it was. I mean, I'm not going to pretend to say the word voice out there saying rightly that it was a load of bullshit, but still,
definitely at the time, we were, the United States was acting irrationally out of fear and was largely in support of it, like most of the politicians and the people.
Yeah, same in Britain. We're no different. We were no different. So yeah, I can definitely respect that on Miyazaki's part there. All right, next question.
Yeah. Let's go to number 2 from Riku.
Okay, what do you make of the Witch of the Waste and the changes she goes through? Right. Okay. So the Witch of the Waste, like, she starts off the film young, but also kind of grotesque, I would say.
Yeah.
And by the end of the film, she's old and she's far less grotesque. She's innocent at that point. She's become, I don't want to say placid, gentle. I don't.
Well, she's definitely a lot more childlike because she's sort of been reduced to like, ooh, like shiny fire heart, like me, I want, like, oh, like cigar, like me want, like definitely like is just a creature of pleasure and pain, chiefly, like unvarnished.
Yeah, more id than anything, perhaps. And you know what? I think this does tie in with the idea of age and aging in the film, because between her and Sophie, they are two characters who, for whatever reason, are pretending to be of an age that they are not. Like, Sophie at the start of the film feels like she has no life, like her life is already over, is going nowhere. She is old in her heart and in her mind before her time.
Can I mention just now, because I'll forget to later, I'm so glad you bring this up, because there's a point in the book where she has, like, I don't want to say embraced, but accepted the new kind of her like exterior, like as brought on by the curse, because of the personality that has been kind of foisted on her from being basically a shut-in, like working on hats nonstop all day and night. She's like freaked out and anxious by like meeting people and being in society. And so she's like, you know what? Being an old woman, it's not bad. It's not bad. I'm into it. At least people won't bother me now, that kind of thing. So I'm glad you brought this up.
And in turn, the Witch of the Waste, she is someone pretending to be younger than she is. She's had this thing for Howl for a very long time that she just won't let go. She's just like, no, I will possess him. I will have him. I will have his heart, whether literally or metaphorically otherwise. And yet you see, as the film progresses, that Sophie finds new youth in a sense, like a new sense of life. Whereas the witch, in turn, is half forced, but half otherwise, I'd say, willingly accepts her old age, and that, like, she has to let Howl go, for example. So you see how these these starting points are the opposite of each other, and they kind of cross over. In a kind of double helix in a crossover kind of way, and then they end up at the opposite ends at the conclusion of the film. So I think that she serves as kind of a mirror of Sophie and like Sophie's journey throughout the film. I would also say though that we find that the film manages to offer that there is both dignity in being young and spirited, but also being in old and, how to put this, like
experienced,
unintimidated
by what life will throw at you. Like, because she has that one scene when she meets Kalsa for the first time, and she's like, well, one of the cool things about being old, you're never surprised by anything anymore. I just met a fire demon. So I think, it's all good.
Yeah. So the film, this is very true of Sophie. Like, she looks old, but rather the thing that's holding her back from her life is that she's acted old up until that point. Like, not living a life. Like, there's an opening scene where she's invited somewhere. She's literally not seizing the opportunity in front of her to go to, I think, this party of some sort. She's just like, no, I'm going to close up the shop. Like,
right.
And so the film, I think, is certainly more nuanced than its anti-war message, where it suggests that there is a kind of age, of course, of, as I say, of the soul and the heart versus that of the body. And that, yes, you might be physically old, but you can still have that. That's something that Sophie learns firsthand when she tries to break the curse and travels out into the wilderness as a 90-year-old woman, which is very brave on her part. I mean, as like, inspiring as that message is, there is the practicality of, oh, crumbs me hip. So there is that. But in turn, it also suggests that, hey, with, the Witch of the Waste accepting who she is and her own age, that there's a dignity in that, and it's not a bad thing. Like, it's basically being true to yourself, your inner spirit.
Totally.
And neither is a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, like, that it's really cool that in the movie, like, it's very, I think, well articulated that Sophie remains herself. Like, some things about her body may have changed in terms of, like, her ability to move and get around and her appearance. But, like, there's nothing about old age for this character that has changed her personality or any of the good qualities that she possessed. In fact, like, you could say that, like, as hard as it might be for her now to, like, move around physically at times, there's something about being old that, like, older Sophie, that allows her to, she, like, feels freer to move in the world and, like, unconstrained in certain ways by society. Like, there's an interesting observation, again, that Napier goes into in this chapter in Miyazaki world, where she's referencing this person called Kotani, who makes the radical suggestion that Sophie's real curse was a more insidious and earlier one, to be a young girl. It is, after all, young girls who are constrained by society. And I assume he's also talking about, Kotani talking about native Japanese society, right? Society, and expected to behave in certain ways, such as being charming or flirtatious. When we first encounter Sophie, she seems to be rejecting all that, even insisting on wearing a dowdy hat, in marked contrast to the gorgeous headwear available in her shop. But it is her metamorphosis into old age that allows her to reject the constraints of young femininity most definitively.
Yeah. I mostly agree with that, but I would say that there is also that scene in which her friends are very much the stereotypical girls of that setting, young girls of that setting, and they're absolutely fine with it. I think that the reticence to sees what's before you is perhaps the core idea here, because it doesn't outright reject what they do by having that party, for example, or wearing those like colourful outfits. It just seems more like Sophie has inexplicably become old before her time.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and again, I think the book hammers that home, and there's a dimension in the book that I think is really, really good storytelling on the part of Jones. Like, there is a way of looking at Sophie's stepmother, who's called Fanny. I don't think she's named in the movie. The movie straight up villainizes her. Like, the movie does this thing where, you know, she like plants some kind of magical listening device on Sophie when they make up, and then she leaves, and she's clearly been paid off to do this by Solomon. But in the book, Fanny, like, the book is so great about like giving you perspectives of a character, and then you think, oh man, this character's right. They see the world correctly. And then later you get a contradictory perspective. It might not even be more complete. It's just so different that you're like, oh my God, like maybe that previous character was wrong and that's not how things are. And you could look at either one and neither is really given like necessarily like preference. Or maybe they're both sort of valid in a certain sort of way. What I'm trying to get at is the mom, like Fanny, the stepmom. Sophie, it's not just that Sophie doesn't want to do fun stuff like go to parties in the book. Once her dad dies and she kind of, with her stepmom, inherits the hat shop, she's got two sisters that go off and do stuff. They like be apprentices. And Sophie, to keep the hat shop running, basically has to make hats 24/7. And so she like can't do anything. And then by the time she's able to, as I said, she's become this incredibly anxious person. And it's all and her sister tells her, like, you're being exploited. Like, our stepmom, like, I saw her running around like buying shit and like gallivanting around with rich dudes, and like she's just using you, like making bank off your labor, and you need to like ditch that place. And you're just like, oh my God,
that is very fairy tale in its own right.
Yeah.
Enough.
But like, and then she comes back later and she feels a lot of regret, and she sort of was like, I don't know, sort of, you question like, how was she just being neglectful and kind of her parental responsibilities, and times were hard, or was she being malicious and just like, you know, screw Sophie, like I'm gonna get mine? Like, you don't really know, and I think she wasn't, but you know, it's, I don't know. So there's that aspect to Sophie's character and her background and her story that I don't know, just adds some more layers to all this. But do you have seen a different selection of Ghibli movies than I have? Do you know of another one that deals with age as a core theme? Because I can't think of one offhand.
There are surely people listening to this right now who are just screaming at me.
I don't know if there is one, right? Because
well, probably not age, but I think there's certainly many that have curses or maladies that are beyond just simply the nature of the curse or malady itself. Like, they are a driving force for the change of the character. Change in some way or another.
Absolutely. Yeah. But this is about age.
That might be too broad.
But this is very much like age is like a real a thing, and it's Napier's contention that like this was a very intentional sort of like Miyazaki liked this book and like thought, hey, the like aging population of Japan, you know, the old birth rate declining and all that. the rapidly aging population is this big concern to Japan and Japanese citizens. So this should be a thing in the movie I do. This will be a very kind of relevant and pertinent topic. And Napier says the movie is, quote, kind of a Valentine to the director's older colleagues, especially his many older female staff members, demonstrating that old age can be liberating rather than diminishing.
Yeah. I've had a thought. I actually would say Up on Poppy Hill, because that to me feels about the vibrancy and energy of youth in a way.
Well,
I haven't seen that film in a long time.
Well, if you
so I don't know if
if you're going to talk about that,
I don't know if I feel.
Yeah, I think that a lot of Ghibli films talk about coming of age and the potential of youth. Yeah, no, that's correct. I guess I'm talking about old age.
Okay, in which case, nothing's coming to me right now. I'm not going to say that there aren't any films from Ghibli that cover this apart from Howl's Moving Castle, but it ain't happening. Let's say moth-eating brain. That's two ping pong balls rattling in the skull.
I haven't seen Porco Rosso. That is about a middle-aged man, so maybe that touches on this in some degree. But like, there's just not another Ghibli movie whose protagonist is an old woman.
Isn't Porco Rosso also about how it's better to be a pig than a fascist?
Possibly.
Or am I getting that mixed up with something else?
I couldn't tell you. I haven't seen Porco Rosso, unfortunately. Too much.
I've seen that meme. I've seen that meme floating around. I'm 99% certain that's the case. And I'll say, you know what? That's fucking real. That's the truth right there. All right, but yeah, I think the Witch of the Waste serves a nice counterpoint to Sophie's journey.
Oh, right, we're talking about the Witch of the Waste.
Yes,
forgot what we were talking about. Okay.
So I think she serves as a nice counterpoint, and therefore, like, the film gets to have its cake and eat it, where it both validates being young but also being old, and without like one to the exclusion or detriment of the other. You just have to be true to yourself. You have to be honest about who you are. I mean, that's why the Witch of the Waste, like, she looks in the start of the film like she's wearing like the outfit. She's being carried around by like the spy guys. You know, she's attempting to present herself as like a woman of standing, I would say. A young woman of standing. But that's also why she looks kind of grotesque in that form, because she can't maintain it. Like the truth, it seems to be bulging out. She's trying to pretend to be something she's not, basically.
So the book communicates this theme with Sophie and Howl. So it doesn't do it in the visual kind of way that you get with The Witch of the Waste, but you know, they're two proud characters. Sophie may be socially anxious at the beginning of the story, but she is definitely, I think when you step back, almost as stubborn as Howl, not quite as proud and stubborn as Howl in the book, because, oh boy, the Howl of the book is a different creature. But they are both
he's a Jabberwocky.
Yes, that correct. They are both very dishonest with themselves about how they feel and all kinds of things, honestly. And in the end, they're being able to reconcile their own feelings is part of, you know, and that's like a huge moment of catharsis and the climax of the story. And the Witch of the Waste remains the antagonist throughout the whole book. And so I guess in a sense, like, I actually really like the fact that she's reformed in this version. Like, I like that she becomes, maybe an ally might be too strong of a word, but I guess so. I mean, she becomes part of the little family in the moving castle.
Yes.
And I think this is another kind of sneaky theme of the movie, is like the whole found family thing the anime does really, really well, because, you know, Sophie, you know, it was Calcifer, Howl, and he's called Markle, I think, in the movie. Michael. Yes, Michael in the book. And he's also 16 years old in the book, which creates a very different dynamic between he and Sophie. Than the little, I don't know, 6-year-old, 7-year-old boys he is in the. He's very cute in the movie. I love his little old man costume. It's adorable. Um, but yeah, it's just those three, and then Sophie comes in, and not too like she brings in the Witch of the Waste and the little dog and the Scarecrow, and they all kind of form a little community there in the castle. And she, as much as we talked about earlier, like the asymmetry and of her relationship with Howl and her being a glorified house cleaner, if you want to be very, very uncharitable, I think there's something kind of noble and cool about like seeing her go from a like someone who, like you said, doesn't want to like assert herself and is very put upon and very sort of subservient as a hat shop person, to like she basically becomes the matriarch of this little family unit because she is honest with herself about how much she loves all the people there and wants to protect them. And as sloppy as the last act of the movie is, like she's very assertive and she takes charge, and she has been told things to do by Howl, but she then exercises her own intelligence and is like, no, this is actually, plans need to change because things are changing, circumstances on the ground are changing. We need to do these different things, and I'm going to take care of you. And I'm forming, I hate to say this in the context of this movie, but a battle plan to look out for you, a survival plan, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's really neat, I think, to see.
Yeah, one other thing I'll know about The Witch of the Waste as well that ties in with the anti-war stuff is her rivalry or conflict with Howl is in of itself like a microcosm of the wider war stuff that's going on. Because we kind of have the sense it's been going on for a very long time when Sophie meets Howl, and indeed he seems to have almost accepted it as kind of a, well, I just got to deal with this shit whenever she turns up. I've got to keep moving to avoid, that's why the castle moves after all. And yet, in the end, Sophie, a single person, intervenes and brings this war of their own to its end, which then foreshadows what happens at the end of the film. So I think that also helps build up a little bit towards making the anti-war message as presented in the film more believable, because we can see how these previously implacable enemies are now family. And if they can become family despite everything that's happened between them, why can't these two or these many nations fight each other for what seems to be no reason whatsoever? It gels together with it. Okay, let's pick up then with the next question. This one being from Yokshi. I actually can't answer this one, funnily enough, for reasons that'll become clear in a moment. The question goes like this. Do you find Christian Bale to be the most distracting celebrity dub voice that Disney forced on a Ghibli film, or is his performance fine? Yog, by the way, clarifies that they actually don't mind it themselves. I can't answer this because I watched it subbed. I did not watch the dub.
It's been a long time since I've seen the dub, but I certainly remember, like, his voice. Like, I don't remember enough about the performance itself to remember if it was particularly, like, well acted. But it's very Christian Bale. I mean, he's not like, going "swear to me" to Sophie or anything, but it's a very, like, it's so obvious who it is. I recall it being a little laconic, but there's a large portion of the movie where Howl is a little laconic. So it's, I guess, not the worst fit in the world. I found actually Calcifer's voice, the Bill Murray.
Bill Murray?
No, I'm sorry, not Bill Murray. Wrong Bill. Billy Crystal.
Oh God, I don't want to. I reckon that would have actually been pretty good if done properly.
Oh, Billy Crystal. I thought it to be more distractingly obvious that it was a celebrity voice actor, but I think Billy Crystal actually did a really nice job as Calcifer. I think he actually did a great performance. But I am gonna go. I think as distracting as Bale is, I'm gonna say that actually. I'm gonna say, as much as I enjoy this performance and I love this dub, I'm gonna say Billy Bob Thornton as Jigen in Princess Mononoke is actually incredibly distracting and a very weird cast. I mean, it's a nice performance. I don't think any of it's like bad, but oh my God, like it is just Billy Bob Thornton just talking, and that's it. I mean, so it's a little distracting. Yeah, but there's quite a few ones here with the Disney casting. I haven't seen the dubs of any later Ghibli films that I can think of. I think Howl's and Mononoke are the two latest dubs that I've seen. I don't think I've seen any other Disney dubs. So
I have seen some of them, but they just kind of faded from my memory. I mean, I was surprised when you mentioned that the villain of Laputa was voiced by Mark Hamill.
Oh yeah. Well, I didn't watch the dub, but I had forgotten about that.
Yeah, I think
he's not distracting though. He's just a good voice actor.
That's true. I think though we also need to just consider the context again, because around 2004, like there weren't really, to my knowledge, many big name dubbed anime releases that also got theatrical runs. Like it basically was, as far as I'm aware, just Ghibli stuff, wasn't it?
Yep.
And it was at that point, I think, that dubs started using celebrity voice actors known for live action Western works.
Disney has the money, had the money to do that,
Yeah, and so one then must ask, is it because they were legitimately the best voice actor or actress for the role in question? Or was it more because they simply wanted to say starring X and Y on the poster, basically as a kind of sideways marketing? I don't know the answers to that. I'm not a Disney marketing executive. I do have a soul. I'm sure that perhaps there's some evidence out there that might be able to explain that. But like, I certainly wouldn't have thought of Chris. Like, if I was to pick who would play Howl, I mean, I would probably say any of the modern Doctor Who actors would be a good fit, save for, I cannot remember his name. He's the one who's also in the thick of it, plays Malcolm, constantly swearing.
John Mulaney. No, that's not true.
No.
I don't know. I don't know anything about Doctor Who. I don't know anything about that.
My memory's terrible for names. It really is. But I mean, David Tennant, for example. I think David Tennant would have done a great job.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that would have been, for example. That would have been interesting.
Yeah, or Matt's. I was to say Lucas, but that's a different guy
Matthew
entirely. That's the. Anyway, yeah, you know what I mean. So any of
Matthew
the modern
Barry?
Doctor Who's, I think, would do a decent.
Hello,
No.
Sophie. Sophie, hand me my book, child.
No, Hugh Grant. Imagine Hugh Grant doing Howl.
I'm a vampire,
There's
not a
fault
wizard.
Okay, should we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I just, I was talking about the Disney money. Actually, the Miramax, paid for the dub of Mononoke, and they got quite a star-studded cast. Also, in case you don't remember, I'll just tell you because I remember this because I love that fucking movie to pieces. Billy Crudup played Ashitaka. San was voiced by Claire Danes. Minnie Driver played Lady Eboshi. I mentioned Billy Bob Thornton playing Jigen, the monk, the antagonist. And Keith David played the Boar God.
Yeah.
He was so good. He was so fucking good as the Boar God.
Wait, are you sure it's the Boar God and not the Wolf God?
I am 100% sure.
It doesn't matter. Keith David's awesome, whatever form he turns up in.
Yeah. What was his name? Because he is a named character in the movie. The Boar God. He wasn't the Boar God at the beginning who cursed Ashitaka, but like he was the king of the Boars who led the resistance against Irontown and Eboshi. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. But
Boar God.
Yeah,
there we go.
When he was just like, my people grow small and they grow stupid. Like, so yeah. He was awesome. So good.
Are you sure that wasn't a line from They Live?
It could have been. It could have been.
All right. Okay. Next question. This is just a general comment. This comes from Tim Rattray. Having just done a rewatch of Miyazaki films myself, I'm very curious to hear your opinions on the film's third act. While I like much of what the film goes for, every viewing of the film has left me feeling it to be the epitome of detrimentally clean-cut endings. I mean, we've already said a fair bit about the third act anyway, and its general messiness. I overall walked away from the end of the film, though, like a bit. I was a bit emotional. Like, I thought I was a bit touched by it. And I overall liked it. I think that if one can stumble across the finish line, you still made it across there, to mix a metaphor. So, I like it. But as with everything else I've said thus far, if you feel differently because the film, you think the film's a mess and you think it didn't work for you, I can't disagree with you either.
Okay. I think it's okay to view films for a single entity, like a person, yourself or myself, to approach films in different ways, like different movies, right? Like one time you watch Howl, you could approach it one way, the next time could be another. Or mid-movie, you could be like, well, I think the way I'm going to experience the most joy from this film is to look at it in a certain way. Like we said at the beginning, as kind of a more poetry than a sort of a plot-driven story. Then, I mean, more power to you. Like, I think it's perfectly okay to approach things in different ways to get the most out of them. And definitely if you approach it as a straightforward kind of narrative, like, I think, it's definitely a letdown. But you don't have to look at it that way.
Yeah, so it's up to you how what you bring to the film in terms of how you look at it. But nonetheless, it is definitely very messy, as I say. So, yeah. But I liked it in the end. I say, it's not the best Ghibli film. It's probably not even in my top 5.
No.
More than likely.
It's no one's favorite. I venture to say there's no one out there who has seen 5 Studio Ghibli movies that will say Howl's Moving Castle is my favorite. There might be like a sentimental, Howl's my first crush. In fact, I know that that's the case for people that I follow on Twitter. But I don't think anyone's going to be like, this is my favorite Ghibli film. I just can't see that.
No. But all things are relative, though. Like, I mean, Ghibli, I say all the films I've seen of theirs have all been good to very good to exceptional. So, yeah. I liked it in the end. I like what it was trying to do. It's just very sloppy.
Yep. Yeah, we've I think we've said our piece on this topic.
Okay. Next up, then, this question comes from Anthony Gramulia. Shouts to Ants, who was previously a guest on the pod for. Was it Given? If I recall,
it was
correctly?
Given.
Yeah,
and also there is a. I'll just take this time to apologize again to Anthony and to the audience. There was an unreleased episode. He and I were going to read Battle Angel Alita and talk about the manga volume by volume, but we recorded it like February 1st or 2nd, or maybe mid-February 2020, 2 years ago. And then after that is when, the world's shit hit the world's fan. And that just kind of fell by the wayside. It's unfortunate. That would have been quite fun. And we should have him back on the podcast sometime.
We should indeed. So the question is, and I, again, also can't answer this one for reasons that'll become clear in a moment. How do you feel about how the anime adaptation removed the isekai elements present in the book? By the way, when I say I can't answer it, it's because I haven't read the book. Not because I have an ingrained, allergic reactions to the word isekai. I do have that, but that's not what's stopping me here. So I will pass the baton over to Doc to answer this
I probably wouldn't have thought about this as isekai if Ant hadn't labeled it as such. And, it's...
I mean, look, right? Howl might, he might have Sophie as his clean label, but she's not his slave.
There you go. That, you know what? This is what I was kind of going to get at, right? It's like... we think of the modern day anime isekai. We may define it in very concrete terms, and it may be very strict, or actually not strict, kind of a broad definition about world hopping. But when we think about anime isekais, we know the character types that more often than not tend to show up these days in recent years, a very kind of otaku-y boy who in modern 21st century society doesn't cut the mustard, but put in the context of this other world, his virtues shine and he gets the lady of his dreams and he can be an asshole, but it's okay. All that kind of thing. This is not the case in Howl's Moving Castle. So is this an isekai? Yeah, kind of it is. So here's the deal. Howl, along with another character in this book, are actually from Wales in the 1980s. And Howl studied for his PhD, or whatever you call the levels in Great Britain. I know it's not the same thing. I just don't know what it's exactly called. But his doctoral thesis type document, he did, magics. And so he's actually a pretty smart dude, well studied. And he figured out how to hop over to this world, this magical land of Kingsbury and Market Shipping and the Upper Folding, all these places that are mentioned I think all of them are mentioned in the movie as well. Maybe not Market Shipping, but that's where the hat shop is. But they do mention Kingsbury. You see the sign, and they talk about the folding. So one of the doors in Howl's castle actually goes back to Wales. And Sophie and the gang go with Howl to Wales and see he's got this family there. He's got a little niece who loves him, and a sister who hates him because he's just an irresponsible, jobless, lazy layabout. But his family is used against him by the Witch of the Waste at some point in the story. At one point, Howl goes just to have a reunion with his old rugby club, and he gets drunk, and so he comes back to the castle wasted. It's a funny scene. And yeah, I mean, this is the deal with it. So how do I feel about the movie removing those elements? So I don't mind them at all in the book. I mean, I think that they're quite fun and interesting. I like the way they're introduced, because the way they're introduced is like Sophie is just being, if you're nice, curious. If you're not nice, she's being nosy. And she's opening the door to all the different locations, like you see her doing in the movie. She opens one that goes to Wales, but it's like, you have to travel through this void to go there. But when she opens it up into the void, a thing happens in the magical land where they're at that sets off a chain of events that necessitate the whole group going to Wales and meeting up with Howl's family and all of this. So I don't know. I am fine with it in the book. I enjoy it. I think it's really neat. I mean, the world building in general in the book is actually quite good and tidy and interesting. Like they go into the mechanics of magic a little bit more, not a lot. It's not really detail heavy. The book remains cozy and readable and whimsical, but also, like, I don't know, a lot of the details about the place they're in are fleshed out, and it feels more like the movie feels like a vertical slice, to use a video game term, of this world of Howl's Moving Castle. And because because Miyazaki and co want to do a very specific thing, they have these ideas that they want to get across about war, about aging and the elderly, about found family, about, love and romance. There's just only so much time. And, like I said earlier, the vitriol he feels about the Iraq war and war in general bleeding onto the screen make it impossible to introduce these isekai elements, these other elements of the story. Heck, it makes it hard to flesh out the characters that they have introduced in general, like, and add kind of more meat to those bones, let alone get into these other aspects that are, not necessarily essential, but are world building and flavorful. So, long story short, I think that it was probably a smart decision to remove it. I think that there's a version of this story that could have been made into a film, which is more coherent as a narrative, brings in more of the book, but also leaves out Wales and our world as a piece of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there is still very much the idea that Sophie enters a world she has never experienced before anyway. It's just not literally going through a portal to make that happen. And while I quip about the whole slavery thing, because that's modern isekai in a nutshell, and put it in the fucking garbage where it belongs, like, at some point, I think for the pod, you and I are going to have to go and delve back into the history of isekai, but it wasn't shit.
Yeah. Oh, well, when it wasn't shit. Okay, I'm into that.
Yeah. And explore its roots. Because, I mean, I'd be a liar if I said I didn't find the idea of, I'm a regular dude in a new world. Isn't that interesting? It's just that more often than not, modern isekai tends to be about allowing typically straight white men to be the worst kind of people possible.
It's just super shitty power fantasy.
Basically, yeah. But I still think the idea can be read in this film that it is Sophie discovering a different world anyway, one of magic, and even just, well, the world that was in front of her that she never felt she wanted to explore or could explore for whatever reason. Again, tying to the idea of being old before herself.
I should say, just for, like, make my thoughts clear, that I think that the world of magic, I mean, certainly inarguably in the book, is known and common and a thing to people in that world, like the fantasy world. I think that's true in the movie also. I think You know, because I think, you know, you have
yeah, you're right.
being like, hey, little wizard dude, what's up? Can I get the usual spell? And you have the ladies talking about, oh, Wizard Howl, it's the castle. Maybe he's coming to town, like at the beginning. So like, it is not entirely mysterious and unknown to these citizens, but you know, not just anyone gets to go live in the moving castle. So I mean, so your point is still very much right on. She's pulled into his life of magic, and clearly, even though people know about it, you know, they're not all wizards.
I think from Sophie's perspective, she'd probably say that magic is something that happens to other people. And then appropriately enough for this film, magic happens 100%. To her in a couple ways.
She has this weird idea.
By the way...
Go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to say, by the way, put a pin in the idea of magic happening to her, but not in a mechanical sense, for something I'm going to talk about soon.
Totally. I think we're on the same page there. And I think it's another thing that the book hits harder, but is still present in the movie if you look for it. What you're going to say. We will see. But, oh, rats. I forgot what I was going to say. Damn it. Maybe it'll come up later. Anyway, let's proceed.
Yes, let's move away from isekai. The easiest thing we'll ever do on this podcast. So we've already talked about Felon Files' point about the Rat Wars, so we'll not repeat that. Final comment comes from Mazagos and goes, not a question per se, but I love the novel to bits, and I've always been a little sad that the movie largely sacrificed the characters' flaws and personality and complexity in favour of Ghibli's brand of idealism. I feel Howl's Moving Castle suffers due to this more than any other Ghibli film. Honestly, speaking to someone who's not read the book, I'm okay with the level of simplicity on display for characters and like an execution of ideas here. Because sometimes, as I say, you might want your anti-war message can be as simple as war is shit, and we're not going to explain any of the backgrounds to the countries or whatever because we don't need to, because all pretense is stripped away. At its core, it's an ugly and a disgusting and appalling thing that robs the world of magic. Again, I'm setting up a motif here and building to it. But I've not read the book, so I really can't comment more than that, and I'm not going to say that Mazagos is wrong to mention that. I don't even know how I feel about it being like disappointing relative to other Ghibli films. I still liked it overall. I liked it a lot. But as I say, I think that everything that this film does, while it does it well, in my opinion, even if messily, other Ghibli films do it better. Lapta is the best anti-war story. Spirited Away on its own merits is the better romance story. Or even Mononoke, to some extent, I'd say is better.
Whisper of the Heart is probably... And, you know, that's a straightforward
Poppy Hill
story. Up on Poppy Hill, great.
Yeah, Ponyo as well, probably to some extent. And if you're talking about looking at the idea of like what it means to be a child and like the wonder of childhood, you're not going to do any better than My Neighbor Totoro.
Yeah,
impossible.
Totally. Totoro.
Not even if you rolled a natural 20. Not even if you rolled a natural 20, would you do better than that?
Specifically on adaptation, like pardon me, I don't know what happened there. I haven't Ghibli movies that are straight up one-to-one adapted from a book. You know, like I haven't read The Borrowers. I haven't read. I haven't seen Tales from Earthsea, so I can't compare it to the Earthsea series of Le Guin. I have read a couple of those books. So, you know, I don't know adaptation. I mean, I guess like there's Laputa has like some influences, but I don't think it's like adapting anything straight up. So I'm really also not equipped to answer the question, because this is like, gosh, the only thing I can think of off the top of my head anyway, where I've read the book and I've seen the Ghibli movie. You know what I mean? I haven't read The Borrowers. I haven't read whatever Kiki's is based on, you know, all that kind of thing. I do know, so I do want to say that like the book, the things that it has time to go into are not war related. Like I said, war is not a thing in this book. It is about other things, mainly the two characters' emotional journeys, chiefly. in a magical place that is fun and quirky, and also there to Howl gets a cold and he has to endure it because nothing can cure the common cold. You know, that kind of thing. Not even magic.
Not even magic.
Yeah, he can do all sorts of other things. But and you know, even characters like Calcifer are more multifaceted in the book. Not to say he doesn't have necessarily like I don't know, ulterior motives super much. But there's just more to him. You get him to spend more time with him, and you know, and you talked about like the pacing problems of the romance and the romantic thing. Like that feels a lot more natural and organic in the book because Sophie and Howl get to spend more time together, and the characters that the book introduces, like it weaves together really nicely, and way more so. Speaking to Masago's tweet here. Way more so than the movie. I feel like the ending of the book was incredibly satisfying. I loved the way that everything in this magical little fairy tale got tied together in the book. I thought it was very, very well done. Like Wynne Jones just has again a real talent when it comes to that stuff and wrapping up all these different threads into something that you just felt like good at the end, and you felt like you had closure and all this sort of thing. And I think I would not, again, call the book complicated or complex. It's very cozy, very readable. Doesn't have any of the Miyazaki war stuff. And I would totally recommend it. I think I'll take this opportunity to just recommend the book. It's not a long book. I don't know the page count because I read the audiobook. And it was only like 8 hours, which for an audiobook, you know, I mean, I've read audiobooks that are, you know, JRPG length 10 times the length of Howl. Like Infinite Jest is like 80 hours long. I've done the audiobook of Infinite Jest. So it's a pretty breezy read. And I would definitely, I think if you like the movie, I think that's a really good in. Like, whereas if you never heard of this or whatever, it might be more difficult of a sell, I guess. But like, if you're interested in the movie or you like the movie, and even the idea of like re-experiencing this story, but in a more complete fashion appeals to you even a little, you should absolutely seek out the book. The book is very good.
Fair enough. Right, I think that brings us to the end of questions and comments. So thank you very much to everyone who contributed. Hugely appreciated as always. Do feel free to keep an eye on our Twitter for future questions, or future prompts for questions rather. And of course, if you want to be in on all the action that involves questions and the asking thereof, along with other cool things and a really nice community to boot, go over to ko-fi.com/Warui-Deshou, drop us a couple of bob in there, and just let yourself in. Come and join us for good times and banter.
Ditto. Well, I think since the questions are over, then, and I'll just say for me, again, thank you everybody who asked and commented. We can get to our own talking points. I have to say that the questions covered just about all of mine, bar one. So, Shadon, do you have anything that you would like to bring up and talk about?
Yes, I do. Okay, let's talk about the mechanical design of the various war machines in this film. Because I think that given the way they look, the film is trying to draw a visual comparison between them and the titular moving castle. Indeed, part of what we learn in this is that the weapons of war, like the airships, that are shaped almost like whales, not the country.
Damn it, you beat
the marine animal. That would be really, really strange though if that happened, and also a bit terrifying. But anyway, the airships, they have moving parts in a way that reminds me, when I look at them, of the moving parts on Howl's Moving Castle. And in turn, they are also, of course, powered by magic or have magic weapons, because at least one of them at some point shoots out spy guys when I think Howl's trying to attack one of them. So there's actual textual evidence that there is a magical element to the machines, but there is also the visual comparison. So why am I bringing this up? Well, I mentioned before a couple of times about the idea of magic. And the thing is, I'm going to now bring up Little Witch Academia, because one of the core ideas of that show is that magic should be magical. It's not just magic in terms of like the actual force, whatever you want to call it, like the ephemeral energy that you use to like conjure fireballs or turn people into chickens. It's the idea of whimsy, of wonder, of enchantment, of the mind, of the soul, that kind of thing. And that, of course, was what that show was about. Akko in that show was trying to make magic magical again, instead of it being just something that is taught as a tool to be used, something that's entirely defined in textbooks, something that has less definition. And I think that Howl's Moving Castle also has a grip on that a little bit, because we see in Howl the idealized form of what magic should be in this story, which is it creates this weird and wacky castle and this like family, like not doesn't create them directly, of course, but rather provides the environment to be in. We have, of course, his bedroom, which is decorated with tons of trinkets. Like that is such a visually rich scene in itself. And Howl himself is seen as like a positive force in the world, despite his own internal problems and the rage issue that he has with fighting against the airships. So I think that what it's trying to suggest is that if there is such a thing as magic or even technology, if you want to view it that way, it should be used to create wondrous things, like quirky things that make the world a more vibrant and interesting place to live in. It shouldn't be used to wage war, to generate conflicts. So that's another way in which the film shows its anti-war message, by showing the opposite, like the idealized way in which this, magic or technology should be utilized, by creating things such as the moving castle.
Do you want to know an interesting theory out there about Howl in the castle? So this is not, of course, my own.
Does it turn upside down when you defeat Richter Belmont at the end?
I wish I could come up with a really good jokey response to that, but that's very well played.
Die monster,
etc. No, I mean there's so Dominic Chin has this like really neat. I mean, this is not how I saw the movie, but just thinking about it, what you were saying about magic made me think of this. So he describes the castle as a dynamic, quote, autopoetic system, a living thing continually regenerating itself based on Howl and Calcifer's emotional feedback. Chen sees the castle's many portals as a metaphor for the internet, with Howl as a lone hacker who uses his magic technology, builds a network, collects data, and tries to change the world through his own talents. And so in that way, Howl is the precursor to Persona 5. He doesn't say that.
It's kind of crazy.
Chin doesn't say that last part. That's only me.
No. But you know what's funny when you bring that up now, I can think to myself is you were joking before about like how the film was also about cryptocurrency, like using Calcifer to make cryptocurrency or stuff like that. And well, it turns out you're not the only one who thought of that, at least in some way. So that's brilliant.
A Bitcoin miner in your hearth.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like the other thing I should mention as well that ties into this is going back to the idea of being childlike. Howl is a child at heart and has been all of his life, basically ever since he obtained the powers he got from picking up Calcifer in that field. And so I think the film, while it does try and play it both ways, and for the most part does in saying that there is dignity in the youth, in being young and also being old, I think it also favors the childlike perspective on how we should utilize magic and technology, in that there's something pure about the childlike, the spirit of a child, whereas an adult loses that, and in turn that's what leads to like, war machines and such and conflicts. So yeah, they do, like, the film I think can be cohesive at times with what it's trying to get across, even though it's also very messy at various points. But I really like that visual comparison. It wasn't something I noticed when I first watched this film a couple of years back, but when I saw it this time around, I was like, why are they whales? And I was like, oh yeah, they remind me of the castle, and that explains it.
So I have 2 talking points. I'm trying to decide. I think I'll talk about Howl here because you just made me think of that point. I think the character of Howl, certainly in the book and also depicted in the film, or how do I say this? Like, the parts that the film brings over from the book, like that character, I think it is a very weird decision. As much as I have praised the really kind of raw way which Miyazaki puts his emotion into this film, the conduit being the character Howl, I think is a bit of an odd fit in some ways, because Howl is like, and maybe the idea is like people are contradictory, it's normal, whatever, but like he just, like, his other characteristics are a really odd fit with like an anti-war radical, like a seeker of justice, someone who's out there committing violence. I mean, like, they do the scene. It'd be one thing if you didn't do these scenes, but they do the scene where his hair accidentally gets dyed red and he throws a temper tantrum about it. You know what I mean? He's like oozes slime everywhere, and he's very childlike, very vain. They do the scene in which he's afraid to go see the king because he's a coward. And so he's like, hey, you can go in my place as mom. And they do, and to their credit, it fits better, because they do the thing where he's like, oh, well, I'm able to accomplish more things when you're with me because you give me courage. But like, man, like a vain coward being someone who's really animated by justice, it's a very weird kind of thing. I don't know. Do you think it's too disjointed, or do you think it's like do you think it makes sense?
Well, it's again messy, because the thing about Howl fighting to like disrupt the war effort that's happening, it's a child lashing out, that rage there, because that's who he is. He's still a child at heart. He always has been. And I think that then the film is trying to have its cake and eat it here, where it's like, okay, childlike wonder and creativity is good, but children cannot solve war or rather a childish, like, simplistic mindset cannot solve war. Like, for all his power, all his magic, he can't stop it. But that then, of course, flies contrary to the fact that the war is stopped by 2 people saying, make it so, which, like you said, it's like the castle. It's a bunch of things that mesh together, and it kind of moves drunkenly across the landscape, and it's good to look at. It's cool and interesting, but it does have its problems. It's a movie of contradictions at times, which is a bit unfortunate, because I think that if there'd been more thought paid to some of this stuff, it would have helped a lot. But yeah, I can't disagree with you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. The more I think about it, the more that, like, this was just, in some ways, maybe just not the right story to adapt and do this thing. But I don't know. But I like it. I mean, I like that he did it. I like that it exists in the way that it exists.
It was a good effort.
It's just this really, it's a tale of 2, objectives smushed together. I don't know, but what's your next talking point?
I think you've actually, because I brought up then about the idea of like the contradiction of Howl being like,
Hmm.
childlike, having
Hmm.
childlike anger, and that was contradictory to, okay, that's a simple solution, it doesn't work, but here's a simple solution that does. And I'm like,
Right.
yeah. Maybe it's the simplicity that's not the problem here, but more the dialogue between people. There needs to be like a mediator or someone who comes in who says that peace is the option, like, which is what Sophie does. But other than that, the honest answer is no. I don't really have much else to add beyond what we've already discussed. So I'll pass the baton back to you to make your final
Yeah, I mean, the
talking
only
point.
other thing I wanted to talk about is like the early parts of the Napier chapter. She talks about the way different people have interpreted what the moving castle means, and if you read this and you're sort of allergic to film criticism, and you're like, oh, great, people are going to take this thing that's just what it is in the story and make it this big metaphor that doesn't mean anything, blah blah blah. Hear me out here, because the castle in the book is described, but not in such great detail that like Miyazaki is lovingly recreating it. Like this is his original creation. Like it's a
Mm-hmm.
schematic given a very rough outline, and that he's going from, and he's making his own kind of thing. And so I think it is interesting to psychoanalyze a bit, or to suggest that it might mean different things. And um, Napier contrasts it with the bathhouse in Spirited Away. Very clean, hierarchical, visually distinct hierarchy, in fact, fits together, unified aesthetic there, versus what we know Howl's Castle to be. And she says, like, maybe these are just two ways that internally Miyazaki kind of thinks about the studio itself. Like,
Oh,
yeah, on the one hand, organized together, unified, a clear hierarchy, and on the other hand, perhaps in a different way, perhaps even spiritually, a hodgepodge, a clunky thing, something just put together out of all these parts that weren't naturally fitting together, kind of like the people that live in the moving castle by the end, the family. And it works.
yes.
It gets them where they want to go. It doesn't. I mean, it falls apart when they want it to, but they rebuild it better than ever. And it's sort of representative of their own little family community. And yeah, it's
Yeah.
really neat. So
Hmm.
like, um,
If
yeah,
I
yeah, go
may add
ahead.
to this, you were saying before about the idea of how Miyazaki is pushed after a time to get new talent into the studio. Could that not also be what happened, or like be applied to Sophie joining the family to expand your the analysis there?
Yeah, I mean, it could. I
The
mean, it
yeah,
was, yeah, it was a thing that was
yeah,
important to him,
like
but he
her.
just went back on it so many times. Like he couldn't keep his hands off the wheel, despite knowing it was
Mm,
important to give people like Hosoda a chance to do things and become creators and people that could head up these projects. Like he just couldn't stop himself from, you know, 6 months into production or whatever, swooping in, as I said, and saying, I'm taking over this project. So yeah, make of that what you will, I guess. Contradictory man in some ways.
mm. Yeah, I do like that idea, but I suppose my argument would then be that if that were the case, it's definitely not intentional, of course, but like I think part of the issue one might take with that interpretation is that it's not ultimately from Howl's viewpoint; it's from
Hmm.
Sophie's. Now, if it was from Howl's, like it would then be about him like tending the house which he doesn't actually do. It takes the outsiders to come in, but Howl is always for the much of the film, for both the audience and for Sophie, a person of mystery. Like there is that alignment where we're often learning things about him at the same time that
Hmm.
she is, and so there's always like the curtain being peeled being pulled back to reveal the wizard behind there, the literal wizard, as it were. So I do see the interpretation. I think it's an interesting one and certainly valid. But I think that the one quibble I would have of it is that you would then have to view this as being a story about the studio from the perspective of an outsider. And you know what? Maybe that works in its own right.
Well, I think you don't have to make it like the tendrils of the metaphor don't have to encompass the entire work. Like something can kind of be freestanding, and it can serve more purposes than one, right? It can be a metaphor for a thing, but also be in another part of the story. It could be a metaphor for something else, or like, it just, and it's not even up to Miyazaki to dictate that at this point. The text is out there in the world, and we are all bringing our own experiences and ideas to it, and time is doing the work of washing away the context that we are trying to provide here. So, that's what I would say about it. And it is cool, I think, that it's like that the thing that is contrasted with the war is not, Kingsbury is part of the war. Like the town, or at least the people safeguarding the town, like the government, the people that are supposed to be looking out for all the citizens, like, are party to this war, and they are making all the complicit, and not just complicit, they're pushing the buttons, making it happen. The thing that is contrasted with the awful war is the castle, is like, so it's just interesting that and this is all Miyazaki. Like I said, Wynne Jones doesn't have war as a big thing in her book, and so the sort of, maybe not even corrective, but the contrast to war is family, and it doesn't have to be something that is an institution. It doesn't have to be blood family. It doesn't have to be something that is neat and tidy. It is, a ramshackle thing that looks like it is barely held together. It is something built from parts of all kinds of different things, but it acts as a shelter and like a source of support for all these characters. And maybe this is the way, I don't know, maybe this is the way Miyazaki sees it. Again, even if maybe he's not thinking about Ghibli as his, maybe he's thinking about, I don't know, some other thing, maybe family in general. I don't know, but I think it is interesting.
It would have been quite it would have been quite amusing if, but completely by coincidence, when the castle is rebuilt at the end, it's completely in CG.
That would have been terrible.
Thank God that didn't happen.
Okay, well, that's my final point.
Yeah, I have nothing else really to add beyond what we've already said. Let's wrap up with some closing thoughts and get the F out of it.
Indeed. Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I'll go first. I mean, look, it's a Ghibli film, and there's no bad Ghibli films that I'm aware of. I'm sure that some people might say differently. It is not the best of their library that I've seen. I would still certainly recommend it, and I appreciate its intent. I respect Miyazaki, putting his feelings and emotions into it in the way that he did. My complaints with the film are pretty much entirely about its execution of its ideas, and not the actual ideas themselves. Much of it sometimes feels contradictory or disjointed or just sloppy, as we've said, but you'll still enjoy it. And as I said, I came out of my most recent rewatch of the film feeling a little teary of what happened. And if a film can do that in spite of its stumbling, almost drunken nature in which it handles its material, it's got to be onto something. I mean, yeah, I can definitely recommend it, but if you had to pick any one Ghibli film for the night, I wouldn't put this at the top of the list by a long shot.
That's your back of the box quote right there. If you had to pick up one Ghibli film for the night, this isn't it. Yeah, no, look, what's a good way to neatly and tidily wrap up my own complicated feelings about the movie? I think it's better on a rewatch than it is a watch. I think the first time you're going in, you don't know what to expect. Like, you're going to come away like, oh man, that just was lacking. That left me wanting, just so much more. And man, the execution on a lot of this was not good. And what was that last act or whatever? But like, I think on rewatch, I mean, just treat it as a buffet. Like, take what you want from it. You know what I mean? If you want to watch beautiful architecture and countryside and the lovely animation, like, I think this is a great film, like, to just look at. I think there's fun to be had in the first couple acts with the characters. I think that the raw emotions on display are really good. Again, it's it may be difficult for some to do, but like, if you want to just like look at this as more of a poem, as an emotive piece rather than, a straightforward story, I think there's more you can get out of the movie that way. Or if you just want to rewatch certain scenes, I think it's good. I think it works as a really great advertisement for the book, though. I think that like there's so much here that is also in the book, like, and then the book just either does differently or takes further or puts its own spin on or develops. It's like such a nice like appetizer, I think, for the full meal that the book is. And I think there's a similar spirit to the more pastoral parts and the non-war parts that is in the book overall. Now, there's a lot more, to the character of Howl. He's a little bit more of an asshole. He and Sophie banter a lot. Like, there's not a tender bone in that man's body in the book. He's very tender in the movie toward her. He is not a tender human. He is definitely more of a argumentative person. They're not really honest with each other. They're a little bit stubborn. They fight like an old married couple, so to speak, throughout much of the book. Yes.
How appropriate.
Yes. But they do end up falling in love long before they admit it to themselves. And so it ends, there's a similarity there in that ending. But yeah, I don't know. There's tons of Calcifer's great in the book. It's great. The book is great.
Oh,
and the
yeah.
movie's great. Calcifer's great in the movie. So I can't be like, this movie is bad, or I don't recommend this categorically, because, I think that it is good and has a lot of good parts to it. Although, again, when viewed in a traditional sort of way as a story, holistically, it's not great. In fact, it's not good. But I think there's a lot you can get out of it. And again, if you and please read the book. The book is just great.
Heck yeah.
All right. I think that's going to do it. I think we have moved the castle sufficiently.
Yeah.
So
the podcast is falling apart at the end. We're going to rebuild it before we leave.
No, this is the part where everything looks new and fancy. We moved it, and we've set up shop, and we have the billiards table, and everything is great. So thanks, everybody, for listening. If you would like to show some love, show some support for the pod, you can, of course, visit our Ko-fi, which we've talked about. If you do not or cannot financially support the pod, no worries. You don't have to do the Ko-fi. That's totally okay. There's still plenty of ways to interact with us and support us. Of course, you could rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Other podcast applications also are available. We're not on SoundCloud, but we are pretty much everywhere else. If you just Google our name and then the podcast player of your choice that is not SoundCloud, you should be able to find us and review our pod. that helps with our discoverability, because the more, and that's good, because the more people that hear us, the more kind of audience that we have. I don't know, just the more that we're able to do, the more that we're motivated to do, and people get to hear about a podcast, which is never a bad thing, in my opinion. Shadon, if people want to get in touch with you, how would they do so on the internet?
Well, you'll need to be in my shop at the particular time when I have the inside of my door set there. I don't have a schedule for this. I'm terribly sorry to say. You just kind of have to get lucky. And again, I did mention that the shop would be a spooky toilet, so it's going to be difficult. Nah, I'm kidding, of course. You can find me at Shadon1010 on Twitter. Come chat to me about anything and everything. Why not? Fuck it. Go wild.
And you can find me on Twitter at The Subtle Doctor. You can get in touch with the show on Twitter at Warui Deshou. You can Gmail us if you want to email us, waterydeshow@gmail.com. We also stream quite a bit on Twitch lately. I am streaming definitely Monday and Friday mornings, 9 to 11 a.m. Central Time. Also other times, but those are not really set schedule. Just watch Twitter, Warui Deshou Twitter, for alerts on that. Shadon is also streaming. Shadon, are you comfortable / capable of giving any information if you don't want to give games times?
Just keep your eyes peeled on the Twitter for when they happen, because there's no set schedule. I'm going to probably be streaming Doom Eternal again this coming weekend. With this pod should hopefully be out before then, but if not, just keep an eye on the Twitter. Other than that, I'm not telling anyone, Jack. You're just gonna have to wait and see.
Eventually, I'm sure you'll get a schedule for your once everyone knows what you're streaming.
We'll see. The reason I'm not saying that I can commit to a schedule is because, well, things change from day to day.
Hogwash.
It's always going to be low on priority.
Nothing changes. Can you reveal, if you're not allowed to reveal Twitch streams, can you reveal what we will be talking about next time we convene for Warui Deshou?
Yes, I can. Do you want me to reveal? Because I know I'm picking the next live action, but I'm also picking the next anime.
No, reveal as much as you want.
Oh boy. Right. Okay then. So we're going to be covering two things that have anti-war stuff to varying degrees. All more like, you know.
I'm laughing because I know the first one, and the way you're setting it up is hilarious.
So the very first one, I have not watched this film in a while, but I want to watch it again, and it holds like a curious place for me because I am a fighting game fan. I also enjoy talking about adaptation and where it goes right and where it goes wrong. So I can reveal with some pleasure, a tiny little amount if you look really close. We are going to be covering Street Fighter the movie.
The Jean-Claude Van Damme, not the anime movie. This is the non-anime portion of our twice monthly pod.
Yeah, and we're definitely not doing The Legend of Chun-Li. Fuck that. I wouldn't put myself through it, and I certainly wouldn't put Doc through it. But no, we're gonna be covering that. I'm actually super psyched for that because I actually think I'm going to end up really enjoying it on the rewatch.
Yeah, I've never seen that movie, by the way.
And that'll make for a fun... That will make for a fun discussion. So
a first-time viewer and a rewatcher.
Oh boy. Otherwise, there is also the anime. And the anime is also a bit silly, but it's also serious. It is also an adaptation. It is very beloved. I have been wanting to talk about this show for a very long time, and I think, you know what? Let's give Love and Peace a chance. It's going to be Trigun.
Oh my goodness. Wow, that's very exciting. I didn't know you were going to pick that one. I was surprised by the anime pick. Yeah, I mean, this is huge. This is that's going to be a huge show because that is a formative show for me. I haven't seen it in a really long time, but I have seen it. Oh man, maybe more times than any other anime because I showed it to so many people when I was 17, and I had a deep and abiding love for Trigun. And so I am very curious, having not seen it in over a decade, how I will think of it now.
Heck yeah. I'm psyched about it for a couple of reasons. For one, it features one of my favorite anime women of all time in Meryl. The other is I can't wait for you and I to get into a raging argument about the ending of the show.
That's going to be fun. We may not argue. I don't know. Who the hell knows?
There's going to be some strong discussions on morality, the sanctity of life, all sorts of stuff. Oh boy, get ready for that. It's going to be a meaty talk, that one, but I am so pumped for it.
It is a show, I mean, I love it, as I said, but in some ways, it is up its own ass about morality. It is such a moralizing show. Like, it is very concerned with ethics and particularly the sanctity of life. So, I mean, it would be shocking if we did not talk about that.
Oh, just you wait. I've had many thoughts. I have a strong memory of like how the show ends and what the pivotal point of it is, and I am ready to talk some shop about morality and ethics to get right into the absolute microscopic weeds of it. And we're gonna have some debate.
Millions thoughts.
Yeah. Yes. So if you want to get in for that, as I say, get on our Ko-Fi.com, donate 60 million double dollars to us or whatever it is, and join our Discord in anticipation of that. I am so pumped to talk about Trigun. I fucking loved it when I watched it, but I, over time, thought, the moral angle's a bit questionable on this. And you know what? When you've got a question like that, you should tackle it head on with a good friend of yours.
Let's do it. I'm very excited. Well... That is the menu for the next, I guess, month or so of shows. So look forward to that. That was Shadon. I'm the Subtle Doctor. Until next time, everyone, embrace each other. Everyone. To the ends of the universe.
Love and peace.
Yeah, can I even say it? I fucked that up so hard.
Just leave it. Go. Call it.